Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Welcome.
Dude,
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
So let's take, first of all, why do we love conspiracy so much? Because I fucking love them.
Dude.
I love them. I love finding out the dirty little tactics and
Right?
secrets and how the government does things and what the fuck's really going on. Why is it so exciting?
I think it's something like deep down in humanity is like we love storytelling.
Yeah.
And these days conspiracy theories are like I mean 10 years ago conspiracy theories were fringe and they were problematic.
Tell me about it.
Right?
I was a
Like,
conspiracy
yeah,
theorist
you're
way
at the
back in
heart
the
of
day
it.
when you were a fucking nut.
Dude, you're a conspiracy theorist when I was not even here yet.
I was arguing with people about the moon landing on the
Right?
radio before there was any podcasts.
I mean, maybe there's some of the mystery element, but the thing is that so many of them are it's a knowledge. It's a thirst for knowledge because some of them are total bullshit. But
Yes.
some of them are clearly there's something there.
Clearly.
Right?
Yeah.
And realistically, if you had like the journalists of integrity from 1960s era alive today and they hadn't been bought out and shot in the head and whatever else happened,
Dude, I
they
think
would
even
be
in the
conspiracy
60s
theorists.
they were compromised.
Well, they were
The
getting
big
bought
one-
out.
The big one is Woodward with the Watergate story.
Oh yeah.
Did you see Bill Murray when I had Bill Murray in here the
I
other
haven't
day?
watched it yet. No.
Bob Woodward wrote Wired, which is about John Belushi. Bill Murray read 5 pages of it, and he said, "Holy shit, they framed Nixon." He said the Bob Woodward story about Belushi was so full of shit. It was so exaggerated and fake and just filled with nonsense. He's like, John Belushi was a lightweight. He goes, John Belushi would drink 3 beers and he'd be drunk. He goes, he was probably the first speedball he ever took, and he died from it. Like this whole thing about him being this raving, drug-fueled maniac was totally fabricated.
It's a good example of how the mainstream narrative had Nixon as a crook.
Yeah.
And he's just one of many examples, right? And when you
Yes.
really start to look into it, you realize, I mean, probably not the greatest guy, but what was the real story there? And what were they
Right.
framing? Why are they trying to get him out?
Yeah, no, this is not a defense of Nixon.
Yeah,
Nixon was not a
exactly.
great guy. But Tucker thinks that Nixon knew too much about the JFK assassination and wanted to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And he started saying, I know who killed JFK.
Yeah.
And he started yapping, and they were like, let's get this motherfucker out of here.
Yeah.
And also, one of the terms that he had agreed to run for president was Gerald Ford, who was on the fucking Warren Commission.
Bingo.
Gerald Ford as his
Yep.
VP.
Yep.
So Gerald Ford becomes the first ever non-elected president. He slips in. He becomes president for kind of a bullshit term.
Yep.
And
does a whole bunch of war party
Yeah.
things and just a whole bunch of bullshit.
And we decide that Nixon was the real problem with the country.
I mean, how often is it that they're allowing someone that they aren't sure about to get to president, and they're sticking them with a VP that is their guy, right?
Oh, yeah, Dick Cheney.
LBJ with JFK.
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney.
Everybody, it
Mike
was the
Pence,
hidden
like-
secret that, Pence was
I don't know
think,
what the hell to think about Mike
Pence
Pence.
is
I
like
have
a
no
preacher.
idea.
I think he was good to get the fucking, the
Just
religious
super
people on.
rhino, super
Yeah. Weird guy.
Yeah. But
Odd
I mean,
guy.
Trump is a weird guy too. Like, who knows what's going on with Trump right now?
He's an
so,
animal.
Yeah.
He's the most fun ever.
I love Trump conspiracy theories because people get so riled up and it's so partisan and political, but within it, there's all this like juicy like meat for thinking about. It's like not even conspiracy theories. It's just like
Right.
his history.
Right.
And especially with the Epstein stuff now and his history with Epstein, it just gets me so interested in, you'll never know the real story.
Here's the thing about theories and stuff. There's so many things that are so weird that you would think, wait a minute, well, this can't be real. This is fake.
Yep.
And then it's connected to real life events in some sort of a way that you would think there's a conspiracy. Like here's one of my favorites is Little Baron Trump's.
Yeah, dude, I just got the
fucking
book. It just came in the mail.
Insane.
Have you read it?
No,
Dude, I'm gonna read it. I just got it.
I should buy it. I
I'm
should buy the
stoked.
book before it gets bought
I got
out.
it in a 3-part series that has the Barron Trump one, and then the Last President, and there's one other one.
And then how about the Werner von Braun one about a guy named Elon that takes us to Mars? Werner von
haven't read that one
Braun,
yet.
the fucking Nazi who ran,
Yeah.
Operation Paperclip and became the head of NASA.
Super occultist kind of stuff in there.
Writes a
like
novel about a guy named Elon that takes us to Mars. And even Elon saw that and he's like, is this real? Like, Like you would think. There's
I mean,
no way.
Simultaneous to us kind of getting like some version of UAP disclosure that implies time travel.
Yeah.
Which is like, Lord knows what that is. But
Right.
it's just so fun to speculate because
Right.
it's like, how would we know?
Yeah, how would we know? And in the whole UAP thing, boy, you want to find a cauldron of bullshit.
Yeah.
That's the cauldron. Do you know
Oh,
who's
yeah.
got the best take on it? Is Jacques Vallée. I'm in the
I've
middle
not seen
of
a lot of his stuff.
my third book of his right now, and it's I'll tell you what it's called.
yeah, I
He's
should
got
read some.
He's the best.
Why,
I mean,
why do you say he's the best? Like, what's your
because
qualifier there?
I'm on this one, Confrontations, which
Word.
is one of a 3-part series of human interactions that have been documented with some sort of an invader from some other dimension or planet or whatever the fuck it is. He is the most irrational. He's the most analytical. He's the least likely to buy into horseshit, but not dismissive
That's
of
like the
strange
critical balance, right?
Yes. Well, he's the guy that they modeled the French scientist in Close Encounters of the Third Kind after. So he's been in this game since the 60s
Yeah.
investigating these things.
And time in the game counts for a ton. It counts for
Oh,
so
yeah.
much. And that's my greatest weakness in a lot of ways, among several, is that I'm just really new to the game. And so I'm constantly like catching up on shit. And as stuff breaks,
Right.
like Pam Bondi, for example, I have no history on who Pam Bondi is because I wasn't paying attention when Pam Bondi was in Florida. And so I'm having to like play catch up on what was going on.
Right.
And the people that have been here for forever, like the Alex Joneses of this world, the Jacques Vallées, the people that like watch things break live, you just get a different level of context. And then you get like the David Ikes that are like, it's fucking reptiles, dude. They're all reptiles. David, have you seen David Icke coming after me on Twitter recently?
He came after me
Dude, it's
too
so
because
good. I love him.
make fun of the reptile thing, and it's like, why won't you have me on?
I genuinely really
Whoa.
appreciate it. It's like a good time.
But
And it's
he's-
like maybe there are
I think
reptiles. I don't know,
He
man.
went too far in a time where there was no internet.
Yeah.
You know, he went too far.
It's you get too certain of yourself, right? You think
It's
you
a-
have the answers and you just
little-
keep going.
a little bit of a grift.
Yeah.
With some of these folks. I'm not
Yeah.
saying necessarily him, but it's a little bit of a grift.
Yeah. Well, it's an easy temptation to fall into, especially with
Yeah.
the internet. Like every single day, people in my position, I mean, people in your position too, like we have the ability to just like, I'm going to get views and money if I drop deep down this grift. But a lot of them are
Yes.
not, like a lot of them, when you look into them, you realize, oh, there's like literally nothing there.
There's a bunch of stuff that's clickbait horseshit
Yeah.
for sure.
Or at least
And-
there's probably nothing there. right?
Yeah. I've been trying to wrap my mind around the idea of quantum computing. It's exciting, but complex and difficult to understand. What I do know is that quantum computers can process exponentially more data than the ones you and I use every day. Quantum computers also put a new strain on the world of digital privacy and cybersecurity. They may one day crack encryption algorithms that we currently consider secure. That's why ExpressVPN upgraded their encryption to use MLKEM, the strongest available protection from post-quantum threats. With ExpressVPN, all your online activity is rerouted through secure, encrypted servers. Even though all your data is still being handled by your internet provider or whoever the provider is for the random public Wi-Fi network you're on, none of these third parties will be able to read your data or hijack your connection for malicious intent. And with post-quantum protection, ExpressVPN is essentially future-proofing your privacy. Just one of many reasons why ExpressVPN is the absolute best VPN out there. So if you want to get the highest standards of post-quantum protection from your VPN service, tap the banner or go to expressvpn.com/Rogan. And now listeners can get 4 extra months for free. That's expressvpn.com/Rogan. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can get your 4 free months by scanning the QR code on screen or by clicking the link in the description.
The one
Yeah.
that I just recently kind of was reminded of is, you know, the story that Disney sent kids to Epstein Island.
Yeah,
That's like
I
a
did hear
perfect,
that, but
like,
it's
oh,
not.
such a money conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
It's not true.
That's not
It's
true.
when you look it up, you realize that I mean, a lot of the information's kind of gone. It's hard to even tell if it's legitimate websites and information, which is already a red flag. But the ones that are still up, they just sent them into like the ocean. Like they were going on cruises that happened to be in the vicinity of the island. That's
Right.
totally different.
Which is
than
in a
sending
very
kids to
popular
the island.
vacation destination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this like, and that's kind of I think that's the fun part of the game,
We thought about buying the island.
dude.
When the island was for sale, we talked about it for a second. We're like, let's put some of that Spotify
Why not?
money to use. That would be funny.
I think
But it's
they would have
just too
stopped
evil.
you, dude. I think
yeah,
someone would have stopped you.
100%.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
I can't
Because
shut the
there's
fuck
shit
up.
underneath that island. For
No doubt.
Sure.
There's
dude.
got to be something on that island that's incriminating.
that
And
temple.
also, what's in the walls? What's in
Yeah.
the walls of the buildings? Like, I would get into the wiring. I'd bring in pros.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, tell me what the
What's under
fuck's
the
going
dirt?
on. I'd scan the fucking floors. I would,
Yeah, LiDAR
Yeah.
the ocean floor and the surrounding miles.
Also, he's dead. So if he ever fucking hid some shit in there, no one knows where it is.
Yep.
They're gonna
he's
raise that
probably
building.
Dead. I assume he's dead. But
he's-
there was so much shit around it
Mm-hmm.
that like I don't feel 100% sure. I feel like 95% sure that he's dead, 98% sure that he's dead.
Right. I wouldn't go 100 either.
Yeah, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like there's very few things I feel 100%
But they did do
sure
an
about.
autopsy. You'd have to
But they
kill
did an
the-
autopsy on JFK too, and it was not his body.
Well,
Probably.
sort of. They did two autopsies.
Right.
They did the initial examination of the body was in Dallas, and then they flew it to Bethesda.
Yeah.
The thing about that is, and this is a part of David Lifton's book, Best Evidence, which made me become a conspiracy theorist.
I've never read it.
It's fucking great. And David Lifton, who is an accountant, they gave him, I forget what the project was, but it was something to do with the Warren Commission report. So this guy's like a serious bookworm. He read the entire Warren Commission, which fucking nobody does.
Yup.
And it's like 9,000 pages.
That's
or
a
something like that.
superpower. Being
Yeah.
able to read like that.
Exactly, and find contradictions over and over and over again. He's like, this is horseshit. This whole thing's horseshit. And then he found out that Kennedy's brain was missing when it got all the way to Bethesda. He found out that the Dallas doctors said that the neck wound was an entry wound. And then the ones in Bethesda turned it into a tracheotomy hole. It was a bullet hole. He got shot. You could see him go like
Garbage
that.
all over the place. And then you
Yeah.
could also see his face get blown off. And they published photos of him from the official autopsy where his face was visible.
I have a theory, and this is just mine.
Yeah, I'm
and
really
I'm
curious
sure
to
I'm
hear
not
yours.
the only one. I think he got shot in the head at the same time from two different directions.
That's a good theory, honestly.
Because there's a bit of spray that goes forward, which is not like things are weird when you hit them with
Yep.
bullets. Like people have shot people in the head and the bullets come out their eye.
Yeah,
like
like
it ricochets
around the
around, like a
back of the skull.
22 or something
Yep.
like that. But weird things happen when you shoot things, but some things are super consistent. And one thing that's super consistent is when you hit something, it goes in the direction that you hit it, right? So back and to the left. Hicks used to talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Back and to the left.
Yeah.
When making fun of the fact that the Zapruder film clearly showed that it wasn't a shot from the back. But the head goes spray too. It goes spray like this back and to the left. Can we see it? Let's see it real quick.
Yeah, something I love about the JFK story is that there are so many deep experts that have really done the dig, and they don't all come to the same conclusions.
Well, here's the thing about Lifton's book. He also documents how many witnesses were murdered. And it's astounding.
That's the
All
part
these
that often
witnesses,
gets left off,
their
too.
cars got parked on railroad tracks and they died
Weird.
of heart attacks when they were 30 and they got fucking shot in a robbery
Funny
and they committed
coincidences.
suicide. They gas. They fell asleep in their car.
Man, Hillary Clinton sure got started early.
Yeah. Back into the left. Watch this. Watch this. The explosion.
Yeah, because he's already hitting the neck. You're totally
See-
right. It's like
see-
a cloud in
right?
the front, right?
I mean, it could be that the top of his head exploded right there and the force drives him back. It also could, there's another possibility, and the possibility is spontaneous nerve reaction of your body shutting down,
Yeah.
which could cause you to go back into the left even if you get shot in the front.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the spray, or if you get shot in the back, rather, the spray looks like it's going forward. Like we'll watch when he gets hit. See that?
Yep. It's just weird.
But that could be. But the thing is, there's not a bullet hole on the other side, so that could be just the opening of the head, and it's an explosion of blood that comes out. Also, you have to realize he's probably bleeding internally already. He got shot in the neck. So he gets shot here. There's probably blood spraying all over the place inside of his head. And then, boom, he gets shot in the front of his head. But his head clearly goes back into the left.
Yep.
Like almost instantaneously. And in a way that you would imagine if someone got hit like that. Watch this again. Boom, he gets
good
hit.
catch on that frame.
And then back.
And it's all gone. Like his face is just
Oh, he's
clearly
gone.
open right there.
Gone. Right.
And it's clearly not a shot from behind. I mean, like
It's definitely not a shot from behind because there's no entry wound in
Yeah.
the back of his head. And if you're saying that thing hit the front of his head or the side of his head from behind like that,
I feel like if there was a conspiracy theorist training course, the JFK assassination would be like the perfect like dry run training course to like build it around, because you have all the pieces. You have a complex conspiracy with unknown actors from intelligence agencies and organized crime and maybe multiple governments. It's like, and we don't know all that. Then you have a complex cover-up that evolved over time. You have like researchers. You have bad information being fed in from outside. You have conspiracy theorists that are taking it in directions that are like corroborable.
Right.
It's got all the things that you need to both learn how to dig into and learn how to watch out for. It's a lot of fun.
well, and also people didn't really get serious about it until about 12 years after the assassination.
Yep.
So when Geraldo Rivera has Dick Gregory on his show, what is this? Ooh.
Whoa. Have you guys ever heard the theory that frames were taken out of the Zapruder film to make it
that
look like
one's
the car never
crazy.
slowed down?
That's crazy.
That's bizarre. And the thing is, I don't know how to trust things like AI reconstructions of videos.
Let's just trust it, bro. It's fine. Boom. Oh, my goodness.
Dude,
That
poor
is
Jackie,
so
man.
crazy.
So
Oh, my God. That's so crazy.
the theory about the driver shooting him, that's the one I've never bought, honestly.
No, that's
People always say the
that's
driver turned
stupid.
around and shot him. It's
I
like,
think
no.
that's one of those theories that probably the government created.
Yeah.
That's one of those
There's
theories
an open
to make
piece of
people look
evidence.
stupid.
There's an open piece of evidence of some kids that showed up covered in mud at a car shop that they worked at. That it was like a dry day. They showed up covered in mud, and there's a certain guy that theorized that they were hiding in a manhole and shot up at him out of the manhole, and that the car slows down in real life, and that witnesses saw the car slow down, and that there's dropped frames from the Zapruder film. And it's like these are these kinds of theories where it's like how do you dig into that and like prove that? And the answer is you have to get to primary sources. You have to get to like, is there a police report for that kid showing up? Like, is that location real? Like, can you corroborate any of this?
Right.
And the unfortunate truth is you could if you could fucking see the files that our government was hiding from us.
Right.
Theoretically,
Well,
anyways.
if they're supposed to be released soon. Have some patience.
Dude, they're releasing tomorrow, Joe.
Can you? Is that real?
No.
Can you? It's like every day's Christmas.
Yeah, for real.
Can you Google David Lifton witnesses of the JFK assassination odds? Because he did some sort of a calculation of the odds of all these people dying the way they died.
Yeah, dude.
And it's millions to one.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Like,
That's
so
a big
I
part of
think-
what I do how likely is it that this is a coincidence? Is it even possible?
Right.
Right.
That one's very unlikely, which means they were killing witnesses. Someone was killing witnesses. I think there was people shooting from the back and the front.
Oh, yeah.
I think Lee Harvey Oswald, people want to say it's 1 or 0. I think Lee Harvey Oswald was in on it. I think Lee Harvey Oswald probably didn't shoot the president, though. But he might have. He might have hit him in the back because there was a shot in the back, too. You know, the whole reason why they had to call this a tracheotomy is the same reason why they had to come up with a single bullet theory.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're deep.
Because you got to
on this.
explain it. Well,
You know
I'm
the
not.
thing.
I'm
Do
as
you know about
deep
the
as
ricochet underneath the overpass?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like I'm deep enough to know the basics, but there's so many layers, and you have to read the books, you have to watch the films, you have to like
You gotta talk
see
to
the
Oliver
interviews.
Stone.
Exactly.
Oliver Stone just goes off.
And that's why I was curious to hear your takes, because you've actually talked to these people.
Oliver Stone's the best because he's been studying this for fucking ever,
Yeah.
and he can tell you exactly what's going on with Dulles and with.
And he's not just been studying it forever, he's
Yeah.
been studying the actual primary source documents themselves and like reading the real archives that are released.
And then there's a wild connection between Jolly West and Jack Ruby.
Oh, yeah. Jolly West is crazy. Have you read Chaos yet?
Yeah,
Dude. So
Yeah, I've
I
had
didn't
Tom
know about
O'Neill on the
Jolly
podcast.
until I read
Yeah.
Chaos. And then I started digging it because I knew about MK Ultra. I'm like, I have been learning about MK Ultra when I was a kid, like doing psychedelics, but I didn't really understand anything about that history or anything around the CIA back then.
They ran the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic.
Oh, yeah.
And they closed it down after Chaos came out.
No way?
Yes way.
So just recently, huh?
The entire time they had been running this clinic.
crazy.
It's not like they were running the clinic and they said, you know what, let's not run the clinic
Yeah.
anymore. Let's just give it to regular
70s
doctors.
are over, like,
it's over.
whatever.
The peace and war bullshit or peace and love bullshit, that's over.
Yeah, one of the
Netflix
conspiracy
documentary
theories
comes
that's
out this
Yes.
Yeah,
It's coming out this week.
Really? This
yes.
week?
Tom O'Neill
Timely.
is my friend Greg's longtime friend and former neighbor. Well, I think they're still neighbors, but they were neighbors in New York, and then they were neighbors in California.
That's
This
be
guy
a cool neighbor.
Very cool neighbor. But this guy's been working on this one fucking story for
Yeah.
20 years. You imagine just
I
like
don't
pulling
understand
your
people like
hair
that.
out, just going crazy for 20 years.
No, I'm a generalist, and I rely on people like that because I could never stay
Right.
with something for that long.
No, he could have written many other books
Oh, yeah.
on the exact same subject. He
Oh,
can
yeah.
keep going. Like part 2 more I know,
Yeah.
part 3 more I
He could have
know.
written a book about each of those sketchy dudes that he had questions about, like
Right.
each of those CIA guys, each of those weird doctors.
Well, each
There's
of those
whole
times.
rabbit
How
holes.
about each time that Manson got away with like committing
Oh,
crimes?
yeah. And the
they
girls,
just-
too.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, it's above our pay grade.
Yeah.
So they were paying people to do this. They were giving the Manson family LSD and money. They were allowing them to commit crimes. And the whole idea was just to change the idea what people thought of as hippies and
Well-
to stop the anti-war movement. And also to see what they can get away, they could do with.
I
this
suspect
acid.
I mean, to me, the big question is that seems like the first, like for sure that's going on, right?
Yeah.
Is to co-opt the hippie. I mean, first the hippie movement probably was to co-opt the anti-war movement that was pretty buttoned up. Like,
Yes.
I suspect that LSD did not just escape the lab. I suspect they were like, quick, turn all these kids into crazy hippies. Like, try this out, try this out, try this out. 'Cause-
Really?
Yeah. So
Why do you
so
think
check this
that?
out. Have you read Strange Scenes Inside Laurel Canyon?
I started to read it. I have not finished
It's
it.
so I mean, even just the
But it's
first chapter, right?
nuts.
So if you take that book's premise, it's basically that before the hippie movement, there was a very powerful organized anti-war movement led by a bunch of Quakers, a bunch of black activists, a bunch of, like, my dad was one of them. And it was not this hippie fringe thing. It was a very powerful anti-Vietnam protest. And the moment that LSD gets introduced, it becomes all peace and love. And he points out in that book how all of these people, like Frank Zappa, like lead members of the Doors, people organized the Monterey Pop Festival over and over and over, like, he probably has 2 to 3 dozen examples specifically he goes deep into. They all just happen to move from wherever they are all over the world into this area in LA that is not a hotbed for music. And they all just start making music about peace and love and doing LSD. And all of them have parents that are from special forces, intelligence operations, Pentagon. Like some of the musicians themselves have backgrounds that look exactly like CIA operatives that were doing like revolutions in Cuba and
Like
overseas.
who in specific?
Like the lead singer of the Doors, Jim Morrison, for
Yeah.
example. Frank Zappa. So Frank Zappa's one where his dad and his mom were both. Frank Zappa's dad worked at the base that was like the chemical weapons, like where they did their chemical weapons research. His dad was a chemical weapons specialist in with like top secret clearances, which is basically like. When you read about what his dad was, it sounds a lot like what MK Ultra would be. It sounds a lot like what you would like drug experiments. And
Chemical weapons is drug
well,
experiments.
chemical is the wrong word. Psychological operations, but it's right there, like it's on his Wikipedia page. It's not hard to find these things. What that guy did, that I forget who wrote the book, but what he did was not like uncover evidence that had never been uncovered. He just looked at all these different people whose histories were very public, but he put it all together and realized like that's a lot of people that all moved to this one place and all started producing music that was like all within this one thing. Like Jim Morrison, his dad was the lead commander of the boat that was in the Gulf of Tonkin that started the Vietnam War. That's like kind of a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
And you could definitely make the explanation that kids often rebel against their parents, right? Kids often step out of line and are like fuck the old way.
Right.
But a lot of them were ex-military, like directly ex-suits and ex-CIA.
Was Morrison an ex-military
No,
guy?
Morrison, I don't believe he was.
Why do you think that he looks like a CIA operative then?
No, not Morrison. I was saying Frank Zappa.
But you said lead singer of the Doors too.
No, that was just me giving examples. The guy specifically that he said that had the history that was he was doing what looked like color revolutions in Cuba. Because I'm not super familiar with the music of that time, I might forget what band he was in. It might have been the Mamas and the Papas. There was a
Okay.
couple of guys in the Mamas and Papas that he did deep dives in.
But here's the question: you can't like fake talent. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
you,
a lot
you
of them
can't-
didn't write their own songs.
Yeah, but
And I mean, like, you
Jim
can't fake
Morrison
talent. Like,
was
look at Diddy, bro.
fucking good.
Oh no, Jim. Yeah, some of them
Jim
were great.
Morrison was
some of them
fucking
were
good.
great, and
Frank Zappa was great.
crazy great.
But this is
100%.
the thing: it's like you can't like.
100%.
I don't think. But here's the thing: they could push people with talent that they also could use to further their agenda
Yeah.
and make those people more popular than they would be organically.
Yeah.
And put a lot of emphasis behind it. Look, and the reason why this tracks is because what Nixon did. So with this sweeping psychedelic act of 1970, they passed this. They made mushrooms and all these different things illegal so that they could go after the civil rights activists and the anti-war activists.
Yep.
And the
they could
Black
shut them all
Panthers.
down.
They've shut them all down. Go after them for having these things that were societal disruptors.
It also makes fertile ground for COINTELPRO. When you have things like drugs and drug culture, like fertile ground for COINTELPRO.
Well, this is the big thing about Jolly West and Manson is that Jolly West allegedly taught Manson how to use psychedelics and manipulate people. And oftentimes when Manson was with the family, apparently, he pretended to take LSD. And they all took it. And then he would
and then he
manipulate
did like
them.
hypnotism and like weird
Yes.
speeches and
Yes.
like it really does look like. And the thing is that I respect Tom O'Neill so much because he didn't try to claim things he couldn't prove.
Right.
But he just put it all out there and is like, this is what I'm seeing, and think what you think. And it looks to me like you're saying that Manson was either directly trained to practice these things and carry them out, or he was sort of like a patsy in the operation that they kind of like gave him the setting within which to just go along his megalomaniacal impulses and just kind of kept tabs on him and kept him safe and just kept him going. I think he wasn't a part of it.
I think he was
because of
a
how
part of it.
effective he was.
They
Like, he got-
visited him in prison.
oh yeah.
This is why I think he's a part of it. I think they've recognized in prison, like, look, you got two choices. You could be in jail for the rest of your fucking life, or we can work for you. We think you're brilliant.
Yeah.
We think you're an amazing mind of untapped talent. And, you know, you pray to this narcissist ego, and you start telling him things, and the next thing you know, he's out there in the street working for you like a little hoe.
It's crazy how many people that wind up in these weird positions came out of like, you were in prison, then you got released, or you were in trouble, and then you got. And the girls, it's crazy. Those girls, like, some of them had committed some minor crimes, but a lot of them were just regular people. And then suddenly they become like absolute like murderers, like dark murders. Those were gross.
Well, I think mind control is real, right? And
100%.
I think hypnosis is real, acid is real, and then the techniques that they've developed over decades of fucking with people with these drugs, they know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, the dark thing we don't need to go into it because it's real dark, but I think that when you study the MK Ultra files, and this is where there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are hard to prove, there's a bunch of witness victim testimony, but it's hard to prove, is the Monarch programs are an alleged program that never got disclosed, and that's all the programs that are hidden behind child sexual abuse being a part of mind control, because a lot of the drugs, like, they can break people's minds and they can be involved in mind control. But a lot of those papers talk about dissociative identity disorder as like the holy grail of that Manchurian candidate concept. And it makes a lot of sense if you know how dissociative identity disorder works.
Right.
And that is most commonly associated with dark, grim childhood sexual abuse. And then you get all these victim testimonies, hundreds and hundreds of people these days talking about how they were a part of these programs, like people that were on Epstein's Island that claim to have been victimized as children and subjected to mind control experiments paired with childhood sexual abuse.
It's just so hard to believe that people are that evil, but they have
They
been
are.
throughout history. This
They
is why
are.
it's weird. It's like we'll look back on the Victorian era, or we'll look
Yeah.
back on the man boy love of the Socrates
Yeah.
era. We'll go, that's just back then. Back
we've
then.
evolved now.
We
We're
don't
more
do
cultured.
that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when they've identified specific aspects of traumatic past that they can use these particular victims of trauma, of childhood trauma, and take them and turn them into weapons.
Yep.
That's so wild.
Yeah,
but
there's-
that's that is an asset, right? If you got
100%.
someone who's so fucking crazy, you could talk to them and get them to do things and give them acid and get them to Sirhan levels or whatever the fuck they did to Jack Ruby. UFC 313 is back in Vegas. It won't be paradise for one of the light heavyweights in the main event. Don't miss out on any of the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. Alex Pereira defends his light heavyweight title against Magomed Ankalaev. But that's just the cherry on top of an amazing night of fights. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a fighter to win. Just go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your fighter, and place your first bet. It's that simple. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code Rogan. That's code Rogan for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Yeah, I mean,
You can get people to do things.
break Jack Ruby's mind in an instant, like
In jail, yeah.
And the craziest thing is that we've been living in a world where for all of our history until the internet, and really until recent internet history, they could do those things and just not have anyone report on it.
Exactly.
And so no one would ever even know. And I think that there's this feeling that the world is so dark right now because we're learning everything.
Exactly.
And I actually take the opposite view. I think that the light is being shown, and the world is super dark. There's all kinds of crazy, horrible people, but there's all kinds of crazy good people, everything in between.
Yeah.
And you have to shine the light on it all before you can fix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And I think that's one of the more fascinating things about the fact that this is a weird time for uncovering federal corruption, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're in real trouble because I don't think they can use their phones. I don't think they can do the things that they used to be able to do.
That's a good point.
And I don't think they're united.
I hadn't thought about that.
This is what I
They're
think.
definitely not united.
Right.
100%.
There's rats in that ship.
Oh, yeah.
There's rats in that ship. And
Yeah.
and I think everybody's scared, and so everybody's worried that people wearing camera buttons, and so
It is the era of secret cameras, too.
and they're all selfish fucks, so they're all out
Yep.
for themselves. So they probably demonstrated that all throughout these relationships they've had with other people. So nobody trusts anybody.
Yep. I mean, that's the
And-
nature of politics.
And you can't use your phone.
Nope.
You can't use your email. You can't. You probably can't even talk with Alexa in the house.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
No.
you can't.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm at the point where I'm starting to get, like, I'm not literally that paranoid, but I've had some conversations in terms of, like, people that want to leak a story, which I normally just avoid because I don't want to touch it. But every now and then I'm like, let's go on a walk because I don't want to hear what you have to say around any of this shit because I know
Exactly.
it's being recorded. I know it can be listened
Do
to.
you have a crazy phone or you use a regular
No, it's just
phone?
an iPhone. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aspiring to get one of those, like one of the Eric Prince phones or something like that.
That's
but,
when
like,
you've reached the next level
Yeah.
of conspiracy. When you get
Yeah.
a de-Googled phone
And I
that
don't-
doesn't have 5G, you only use 4.
Yeah. But the way I look at it is, so I intentionally do all of my stuff. I basically do open source investigations. I don't try to like break news stories.
Right.
Because it's way safer and it's way more interesting. And my goal is not to know everything or to be some great journalist. My goal is to inspire everybody else, like to inspire the world to think a little more and to be more critical and to look it up for yourself.
Well, you're also serving a function, like a service for people, because what you're doing is you're taking all the time to find
Yeah.
all this open source and then putting it out there.
Yeah.
And you're really thorough about it. You say, this is what I know.
I try
this
to
is
be.
What, yeah.
Yeah.
You've also
I get shit wrong
you
all the
started
time,
doing
but-
this thing with your hand above your head. People steal that now.
Yeah, like
Have you
check
noticed
this out.
that?
Well, it's because TikTok's
Well, it's
green
your
screen.
hand, the way you do it,
one
though, with
finger
your
gets
hand.
taken away. TikTok will delete one finger if I'm pointing with one finger
Why?
because it's a green screen app, and so I'm like using the camera, and it's got in my camera, it's putting the thing behind me, but it's cutting out me. And if I only use one finger, it cuts my whole hand away. So I started doing this. So
Why is it?
just because the green screen, when it's like trying to AI analyze what is a body and what is the background, it'll take away my hand as though it's the background.
Oh, how weird. So you
Yeah.
started pointing
I
out
haven't
to
gone all the
things
way
like
to doing this at the screen yet, but
but I
Elon's
see a
leading the
lot
way
of
on
people
that.
that are doing exactly your way. So that's why they're doing
I mean,
it.
to be fair, I've had a level of success that is unprecedented, and people call me a controlled opposition because of it. And it's like fair, like it's like whatever, dude. Like if I was in all of their seats, I would probably be like, where did this dude come from? But at a
People,
certain point,
think-
it's like an intense level
Listen,
of like
you're talking
suspicion.
to Captain Controlled Opposition over here.
I know,
People
dude.
think that I'm controlled opposition.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that whole term is funny because there's got to be real controlled opposition. That's why it's a term.
It's
because
the info war, dude.
Yeah, well, it's
crazy out here.
A valid strategy.
Yep.
But I
And-
think you could figure it out after a while.
Yeah, and for me, it's really interesting because, and you know this too. You've been in this game for forever. Is when you actually get to meet people in real life, you learn things about them. You get that vibe of them that
Yeah.
is not, it's not impenetrable. You can be fooled.
Yeah.
But like, how much can you fool? And can you fool all your employees all the time? Like Alex
Right.
Jones is a great example. People call him controlled opposite. Like he's bought by the Jews. He's bought by the commies. He's bought by the, and it's like cool. But I know all of his staff, and I've hung out with them, and like you've known him over years and years. Like, is he faking his entire life? Like. I've been on his show. I've
Bro,
seen what prep
he was
they do.
doing the
like-
exact same thing when no one was listening.
Exactly.
He was on the public radio.
Yeah.
Alex
Yeah.
has been saying he's been talking about this stuff since the 90s, and I've known him since 90. I guess I met him in 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I learned the other day that he started InfoWars, like he officially founded InfoWars, like when I was 2 years old or
That's
something like that.
amazing.
It blew my brains. It was like, what?
The first video of his that really woke me up was the video he did on the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle.
Yeah.
When he showed that there was these groups of masked men who dressed in military uniforms with military issue shoes. They all had the same shit on, and they all ran around in this peaceful protest for the World Trade Organization and started smashing things and lighting things on fire and creating chaos, which allowed the police to then move in. Then these people all holed up in one house. They negotiated with the police, and they were all released.
Weird.
Yeah.
Almost
so this
sounds
is
like
the
a
90s.
few events of the last couple years, you know?
Yeah. Well,
funny
it
how
sounds
that
like
works.
Patriot Front, which just went under. They
Yep.
went under the day
For
after.
real.
Yeah, you didn't
After
know?
USAID was cut?
No, right after Kash Patel gets in.
Okay.
Cash Patel got
Let's go.
Pull that up.
Let's go.
Because there's a video of Patriot Front and me and Matt Taibbi. I go, they're feds. I go, it's me yelling, where's the fat people?
Yeah.
They're all wearing the
I
same
saw that
uniform.
clip. I saw
One
that
guy's
clip.
got a fucking drum. Get
Yeah.
the fuck out of here. These are feds.
Yeah.
These are feds. The day after Kash Patel gets in, they disband.
Funny how that. I mean, I'm
that
really
article?
interested in like looking for like right now with all these new people coming in, Cash and Pam and all the picks, RFK. I'm really enjoying the process of just trying to watch their actions and trying to figure out who's doing what and how much are they going to play to the money and play to the people. And it's just such a fascinating exercise in journalism of where do you kind of and how much leeway do you give them, how much grace do you give them. Especially with the Epstein blackmail hanging as a cloud over the entire federal government. I don't think that any of those three are blackmailed, but I don't feel confident that I know that they're not.
Let's look at it. Here's a possibility other than blackmail. Negotiation.
Well, that's always a factor.
But instead of blackmail, if you are a government and you have information on someone who's an asset or someone who's very wealthy, and this person is like, hey, motherfucker, like, what are you doing? You're at 26 times?
Yep.
How about you shut the fuck up from here out?
Yep.
No more Trump's Hitler.
Well, that's the
Cut it
definition of
out.
blackmail.
How about you say that we did a good job every now and again?
Yeah.
Give us a little credit.
Yeah.
Let's work something out here. It's not necessarily blackmail as much as it's negotiation.
I would argue
Blackmail's
that's
I once-
indistinguishable.
Right. Unless you're getting money too. Like, I know.
No,
you mean.
blackmail is just I know
Right.
something that
You can
you
get-
don't want out. And
Right.
and any level of threatening that it'll get out or,
Okay, but what if it goes the other way? What if the wealthy person contacts them and says, listen, I can make things very good for you. I can do this. I can do that. If I go to jail, this is not helping anybody.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, reverse. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. That's
I
the
think-
opposite. That's bribery, I guess.
Kind of. It's just
Kind
that's deal making. But
Right.
I think that a lot of Epstein's targets were willing. I think that a lot of them because I think that we're talking. It's not just Jeffrey Epstein. It's organized crime as a network. Like he's just an employee of organized crime.
Right.
And I think that a lot of those people are basically saying, "Yeah, I want into the club." Because if you are like a Reed Hoffman or allegedly, if you're one of those guys and you want more contracts
I like
or you
that,
want more
allegedly.
deals, like allegedly. And like, let's be clear, just because I say something on Joe's podcast does not mean that Joe fucking agrees with me, CNN. Thank you. Because like, I'm a crazy fucker. And I got all kinds of theories about Epstein. But like, I think that a lot of them were willing, because I think a lot of them are, I mean, if you're sick enough to rape a child, like on Jeffrey Epstein's island, you're sick enough to want into that club.
Well, for sure, throughout history, there have been pedophiles. That's a fact. For sure, some pedophiles get to prominent positions of power. That's a fact, right?
You know? And the traits
Jimmy
that,
Savile,
the traits that do the same, like
Jimmy
that-
Savile in
exactly.
fucking England, like that
Yep.
way. And that should put it out to bed for anybody.
Prince Andrew, Bill
Sandusky.
Gates, allegedly.
I don't know about him. I never heard that. But Sandusky, I've heard.
You never heard about Bill Gates?
I didn't know he was into kids.
Oh, dude. I mean, he's one of Epstein's closest confidants. And
Here's the thing about the Epstein thing. Weren't they a lot? Were they all underage? Were some
no,
of them
not at all. No, it's very
Right.
complex.
Right.
And
so some of them were in their
were
20s. Like one girl who was
Absolutely.
complaining, or I shouldn't say complaining. That's
Yeah.
a very mild. One girl who alleging that she was 20 at the time. She was saying.
Yeah.
So just because someone has been to the island and has been compromised, right, doesn't
just 'cause they've been to the
necessarily
island?
mean that they've been compromised with underage people. But I think there's a specific group that wants underage people.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say this is not a conspiracy theory. It has been that way throughout history. There
All
are
of history.
many, many, many conspiracies that have been uncovered, and criminal investigations have found that people were trafficking children. It's been done. So this is not like vampires.
No.
We're not talking about werewolves.
Child trafficking rings get exposed and brought down around the world relatively frequently, like at least once a year, but they
So-
usually don't make big news because they're usually not like Epstein.
We know there are pedophiles. That's a real
Yeah.
thing. We know there are psychos who get very wealthy and
Yeah.
want specific things.
Yeah.
Look, there's people that drink rhino horn tea.
Exactly.
Right? Why do they drink rhino horn tea? Because the rhino is so endangered. It's so gangster to have
Just
rhino
the elite
horn
experience.
Exactly.
You
the
want
elite experience.
And what you're talking about is this. It's such an important concept. Is that some people, like, if you wanted to pay for an underage prostitute, you can pay for that. There are women that would be prostitutes underage. The people that we're talking about in the Epstein files that wanted underage girls specifically, because they weren't all underage. Some of them wanted overage girls. Some of them were just scientists. They weren't all compromised. But the ones that wanted underage girls, they specifically want what they couldn't have. Because if you wanted sex that you're allowed to have, you just wanted a young girl, you could just go pay for that. What Epstein was doing is he was recruiting girls that were from like American families and kind of tricking them and coercing them. Like, they wanted a girl that they wanted the experience of coercing. Some of these people, not all of them, want the experience of I am doing this to a girl that I am coercing, I am manipulating, or I'm just straight up being physically violent to get this thing. Because if you wanted a willing 16-year-old, those do exist.
But the thing about these really wealthy, high-profile people, and Eric Weinstein was highlighting this to me once. He was saying,
smart dude. I like
very
him.
smart dude.
Yeah.
And he wasn't making any accusations at all, but he was just talking overall. He goes, I think there are people out there that can facilitate experiences
Exactly.
for discrete clients, and that it's very valuable.
Yeah.
Like, look at the guy who gave Epstein that house in Manhattan. He gave him the.
You mean
the guy
Leslie
from-
Wexner?
Yeah, the guy from Victoria's
Oh,
Secret.
dude.
He gave him a $60 million mansion.
He did way more than that. He
You're
signed
so
his entire
cool.
power of attorney to him.
You're so cool. I'm going to give you a house.
No, he gave him the keys to the entire castle of
Right.
all of Victoria's Secret and Abercrombie and Fitch and all of L Brands.
When you find out that people who worked at Nickelodeon are pedophiles, you go, oh.
Foot
if you-
fetishist, no less.
Right. If you're going to be a pedophile, wouldn't you go be around kids? Like, if you could be and sneak around? Okay, wouldn't you think that here Sacha Baron Cohen thought he had exposed pedophile ring while filming Who is America? Oh, that's right.
Story.
That's right. I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
The concierge said they can
They could do
want
something.
that. We can help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, things happen out in it's
That's
kind of
right.
crazy. Do you remember Andrew Breitbart got killed?
I do remember.
And he
that. But
was
he had
exposing
a heart attack.
Exactly. He
right?
was exposing Acorn because oh man, I'm totally blanking on our boy these days that does all the
O'Keefe?
Yeah,
James
O'Keefe.
O'Keefe? Yeah.
You know that James O'Keefe got his start with Breitbart on that story exposing Acorn, and what they did is they sent James O'Keefe and this other female reporter into Acorn,
And
which is
O'Keefe
this,
pretended to be a pimp.
they asked them for help setting up a underage sex trafficking ring, and the people at Acorn.
I didn't know it was underage.
Yeah, that was they wanted help setting up an underage sex trafficking ring using children from Guatemala or from Central America.
Did they say that in the meeting?
It's on. That was what was on tape.
What?
Yeah. It blew my mind when I read it. I was like, what are we talking about right now? Because I didn't know that history because I wasn't paying attention back then. And that is the story, is that he went in and asked for help setting up I don't think he was probably using the words like 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds. I assume that he was like implying like 16-year-olds, but I don't know. But that's the story.
How did he phrase it?
I don't know. It's not, I can't find those videos anymore. I've looked.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sure they're somewhere, and I'm sure that James O'Keefe could tell the story.
What happened with him and Project Veritas?
I don't know. I have no idea. And it's a whole drama fest. And I try to stay,
probably a lot
I
of
usually try to
NDAs.
stay out of the drama in the modern industry because it's like, it'll just waste your time.
Conspiracy drama. There's
Yeah.
drama inside the drama
There's
industry.
drama in every industry, dude.
There's drama in the drama class.
But yeah, he went in and asked for help setting up this ring, and they allegedly said, "Yeah, here's how you do it. We'll help you. We'll help you. We'll help you." And that's what the case they brought against Acorn was.
Right.
Before Andrew Breitbart mysteriously died, and then the coroner that did his autopsy mysteriously died. It's like that was such a weird one to stumble upon because I didn't know I was about to stumble upon it. Yeah, and people can look. Everyone should look up anything that I say. Always, people should always just look it up and just start typing things in that I'm saying and see if you can figure it out and what you think. Because I am not an expert. I'm just a dude that is looking things up, and I try to be really thorough. But was it Breitbart or Drudge that was the first victim of these coordinated anti-advertising campaigns? I'm not sure I know what you mean by that. Where advertisers all pull out to try to tank you, like what they tried to do to Elon?
Exactly.
I don't know.
They do it strategically.
I think it was done to both, probably, but I don't know.
But I think the first one that they did it on, I think it was Breitbart. I think Breitbart was on this super rapid upward trajectory, and they just completely tanked the revenue. Was it Breitbart or was it? Do you remember, Jamie? Who was talking to us about that the other day? Was it Chase Hughes? Who was it? It might have been.
It is interesting how you can watch out over history. The more history you learn, the more you get to see where certain strategies, kind of deep state strategies, so to speak, or intelligence agency strategies, get invented, and then they start using them.
Might have been Mike Benz. Might have been.
That would be a Mike Benz thing to say for sure.
It sounds like
I can
Mike
see
Benz.
that. He knows his shit. Yeah, he knows a lot of shit.
From 2017.
Okay, Breitbart lost 90% of its advertisers in 2 months. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Who's still there? So this is the Washington Post making it seem like this is a normal thing.
Yeah.
Oh, look, they lost other
Media
advertising.
frame
People
jobs.
pulled out because they're full of shit.
It's just another frame game.
No, they all coordinated to try to boycott them and kill them.
It's so crazy to have all of these tactics exposed in plain view now, and they still keep trying them. Did you see the thing that's going around today of the 22 different mainstream news sites all parroting the exact same thing? And
well, not just that, all the Congress people.
Yeah.
Did you see that? They're all saying the exact same thing.
I guess it's Congress people, not news anchors. It's just that now everyone is a.
It's fucking Pelosi and Schumer and all these different people. There's 12 of them now that they've got saying the exact same script.
Oh, it's more than 12. Alex Jones had a full 22 on his show, so they kept adding to it. At first, it was 2 of them early in the morning.
They're so dumb. They
and then
all
it was
read
12,
the
and then it
same
was,
script. They're so dumb.
But they use a different tone of voice. Yeah.
Well, they give their own spin on it because they're performers.
It's wild.
I've got to have my own creative control.
Yeah. But then you get into the people that are like, the whole world's a stage, trust the plan, Q's in control. And it's like, whoa, dude, calm down.
Yeah, you've gone too far. Well, then when you see that documentary on Q, you realize what kind of people you're dealing with.
Which documentary?
Did you see
the
Into
one
the
that has the
Storm?
really cool
The
HBO
HBO one?
thing? Yeah, but I don't trust a documentary like that either, because HBO is that's the definition of mainstream media. So I try to stay somewhere in the middle of that.
That is true, but I think
right?
HBO let this guy uncover this story accurately. I
believe it.
I had him in.
I'm
and
pretty
he
sure that
explained it.
I'm pretty sure that I did see the documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a multi-part. and it shows all the people that were involved in it, and it kind of highlights a guy who seems to be Q, who is like kind of an internet shit poster, fucking around. And when 4chan was in its heyday, back when all that shit was going down, like it's ripe for that kind of nonsense.
Oh yeah, perfect fertile ground for that kind of controlled reverse opposition, whatever bullshit psyops. And that's where, for me, the bottom line is, can I corroborate it with primary sources? And Q is the definition of no. Of course I can't.
Right.
It's like, what is it? A time traveler that's coming back that's telling us how to save the world or something? Like, I don't understand.
Do you think stuff like Pizzagate, like when they had that guy come in and
I already know
fire
where
off
we're
that
going,
shot, I felt like that was a great way to put a halt to all the looking into the Podesta
exactly
emails.
what that was.
Because then all of a sudden it's a kook thing. Now it's a crazy person and a dangerous person because he's got a gun. You're causing dangerous people to take their guns.
Just like with the vaccines, it's like they always have to make it dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's dangerous to say that this might have side effects, right?
Because if you read those emails,
exactly right.
Those emails are bananas.
They're not explained.
They're talking about young kids who are going to be coming to a party to have fun. They're talking
They'll
about
be in the
pizza
pool, and they will
hot
be there
dogs.
for sure. $65,000 worth of hot dogs flown from Chicago for a White House party.
The whole thing is like very weird.
Did you ever see the archived Instagram posts from James Alefantis' Instagram?
No,
because that's a dark place. So that there's so many layers to Pizzagate that they tried to cover up intentionally for very good reason.
Well, how about the logos?
Well, the thing is, I avoid, in the way I've talked about it, I've avoided all the symbols and logos and even some of the pizza stuff because I think there's so much more ripe, clear evidence that is way more powerful. And James Alefantis' Instagram account is a great example where...
Where can you find it online?
So you cannot find it on Instagram anymore. It's only been archived onto other sites, which is kind of sketchy because it's like, how do I know you're not adding photos and stuff? So you kind of have to dig and cross-reference over and over and over to make sure that you're getting sort of like the consensus, because everyone watched as it happened. Right. So people like Liz Crokin, people like Alex Jones, like they saw these things come out. And you can find plenty of different archives of all of James Alefantis' Instagram posts. And there are things like photos of children with their arms taped to tables. And the caption is, looks like a fun time. And then people that have always been commenting on his posts, like the people that are interacting with his posts all the time, have even weirder Instagrams where it's like kill room. And there's a coffin that's open and things like that. There's like a photo of like a walk-in freezer and it's like, man, looks like you've been having a fun weekend. Things like that are just super dark. And a bunch of babies and a bunch of symbolism, a bunch of children. And it's all photos on their Instagram in plain daylight. And they all got scrubbed, obviously.
Jesus
and that's not to mention Podesta's art collection and the Marina Abramovich connections. It goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the Clintons with the Haiti scandals, with the cocaine in Arkansas. It's like the thing is that we sound crazy. I sound crazy to someone that doesn't do their own research because you just there's so many layers of like crazy shit that's happened with some of these people.
Yeah.
That if you don't know the history of a person like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, it's really easy to think, oh, that's just so insane that you would think that they would be involved in it. And first of all, they frame it in the articles about Pizzagate. They say Hillary Clinton was the mastermind of a global pedophile sex trafficking ring, all headquartered in this pizza shop, which is not what anyone ever claimed.
Right. So as soon as you can discredit that, you discredit the whole thing.
Classic frame job, which Nancy Pelosi explains very well, where you make a false claim and you say that's what they're saying, and then you discredit the false claim. But if you really learn the history of the Clinton family, just as one example,
Did you ever read The Strange Death of Vince Foster?
No.
But
I know a little bit about the Foster situation and a couple of those weird deaths earlier on.
I read that book.
I should read that.
Back in the day, and that's what got me into wondering about the Clintons. Because
Vince
that guy
Foster.
died. They found his body where there was less blood at the scene that was missing from his body, and the gun was still in his hand.
I was actually just reading about that specific murder in Whitney Webb's books like 2 nights ago because she goes over that too because it's a huge question mark.
The gun was in his hand. The gun's never in your hand.
And his family claimed that wasn't the right gun. He had a black gun and his family was like, no, he owned a silver gun. All these weird things. They never found the bullet. Like all sorts of things that just don't add up. And that was right after Epstein had first walked into Bill Clinton's life. That was between White House visit number 1 and White House visit number 2, while Epstein was funding the refurbishing of the entire West Wing of the White House.
I'm glad you brought up Epstein because there was a point that I was going to make earlier that I forgot. The Epstein situation is identical to the Manson situation.
You think so?
Yeah.
Explain what you mean.
This is why.
I mean, I think you don't mean that literally. I think you mean that in a more metaphorical way,
the
right?
structure. The structure of how you would pull, like if you were going to use an intelligence asset to do something evil, to do something where you can get dirt on people or compromise people or accomplish an objective, you would get someone who's already fucked up.
Oh, 100%.
And then you get that fucked up person and you help them, run this cult, or you help them get girls.
But you
And
intentionally keep them separate.
Yeah.
You're not hiring them. They don't work for you.
Right.
They're a private entity.
If he
it's like
wasn't-
layers of obfuscation.
Like if he wasn't personally a pervert, it wouldn't work.
Oh, not a chance. No.
Like think about, like the guy gets arrested for having sex with underage girls or getting them to do happy endings or wherever he did. So he gets arrested, and then the real weird thing is that he just gets out and gets like house arrest.
Yep.
And he gets like a little slap on the wrist, and then he's back in action with all these rich people again.
Yep.
Like really rich, influential people. Like Bill Gates is hanging out with them after he's already been arrested and convicted. Like that's bananas.
But to your point about
but
them,
he's got to already be fucked up. He can't be like a
100%.
straight edge, regular guy with a family and children that is just evil. No, you got to have him in on the thing. So if you got a guy you know is already a freak, you know he's already a nut, and he's already like doing
That's how you recruit him.
blow and fucking hookers all the time, and maybe he's been caught with a few underage girls.
Well, when you study where he came from and how he got plucked from the Dalton School and then got put into Bear Stearns and then got put through Bear Stearns and then got put into money management, like
It was teaching at one point in time.
it was teaching at the Dalton School, and then he was a banker at Bear Stearns, which he conveniently left when this big scandal broke that implicated him and the director Goldstein that had hired him and had been helping him up. And then he left and kind of took the fall and took the dirt with him. And then he went into the arms running businesses, which is where he met Maxwell. Daddy Maxwell, not daughter Maxwell, and Anand Khashoggi and Lease and all these other arms traffickers. And that's where he got into those. So it's like you walk slowly into these worlds. And as they're doing that, I'm imagining they're taking tabs on of like, what kind of guy is this and what's he into? And he's working with arms traffickers. And some of those arms traffickers were famous for blackmail. Like Anand Khashoggi, he was famous for having his yacht filled up with cameras and given his arms deals everything they could ever want while he's selling weapons to them, and he's got his whole yacht wired up with cameras. Trump later bought that yacht, which is super interesting.
Whoa.
Do you know about that? No. So Trump, check this out. And I'm not claiming that Trump is in on everything. It's a very complex thing here, but Trump's history is pretty weird. He bought the Plaza Hotel, which is where the Blue Suite parties that blackmailed J. Edgar Hoover happened. You remember? Do you know about those?
No. What year was that?
Oh, dude. So J. Edgar Hoover, the founder of the FBI, this is where I thought I was starting this fucking job to talk about GameStop and to talk about like the financial markets and shit. And then I realized how important intelligence agencies and organized crime are to how the world works. And I just got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into like,
I don't want to
what's the
miss out on
history?
some of the Epstein stuff.
Oh,
Should we come back to that?
Well, we'll get there. This is all connected.
Oh, it's all connected. Okay.
I could talk about the Epstein stuff for fucking days and start all kinds of trouble for your podcast and shit. But,
Well, I think that trouble's supposed to be coming out publicly.
I don't think it's gonna.
Wasn't there? So the
It's not gonna
FBI in
come
New
out.
York guy had to step down, right?
Yeah.
They were saying they're withholding files.
Yeah.
So the Pam Bondi's office said that they just got thousands of files.
Allegedly. Yeah. We'll see what happens. We'll
Right.
see what happens.
I've been saying that I'm like Charlie Brown with Lucy in the football.
Yeah.
You know, when she pulls the football away every time he thinks he's going to get to kick it, and he goes falling on his ass.
Yeah.
That's
'Cause,
how
like,
it feels.
You haven't read Whitney Webb's books, have you?
No.
You really should.
I've watched a lot of her stuff online, though.
So the thing about her stuff online is that she comes off as way more unhinged because now she's very smart. She's very smart and she's on it.
Clearly.
But she's now very concerned, rightly so, about the sort of technocratic nature of what might be to come. But her research on Jeffrey Epstein is looking backwards at the history of organized crime, the history of Epstein, and it paints a very, like, we know very well who he worked for, and we know who he was associated with. She has primary sources with pages of sources cited about who put him where, who he interacted with, who said what about him, who claimed what about his life, and it's like, it's 2 full books, and it's very well sourced, with primary sources cited all the way throughout. And so it's like, we don't actually really need the Epstein files to know what was going on. They'll hopefully include a lot of new details, but
don't we need it for rock solid proof? Like, don't we need the
So take Leslie Wexner that we were
flight
talking about
logs.
earlier. No, we already have the flight logs.
Do we have all of them?
Unredacted. All
Really?
of them. Yeah.
All of them. So
well,
do we know?
theoretically, the ones we know of.
And do we have flight logs with destinations?
Yeah.
So we
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So we know who went to the island.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all there, and you can read them online. They're on archive.org, as well as other places. But Leslie Wexner is a great example here. Leslie Wexner owns Victoria's Secret and L Brands, right? He's the bank that bankrolled Jeffrey Epstein. And I was saying earlier that he signed the power of attorney over to Jeffrey Epstein so that Jeffrey Epstein was able to sell his assets, manage his assets, buy on his behalf. He could sell Victoria's Secret without Leslie Wexner in the room or even his knowledge if he wanted to, because that's the level of power of attorney that he signed over to Jeffrey Epstein when he was his money manager. And the reason why you do that is so that you can claim that you don't know about his operation. He was just my money manager. I didn't know he was running this thing because I wasn't involved in any of those transactions. But what that meant is that Leslie Wexner damn well knew. There's a whole, we could go into the mega group and we could go into his connections to Charles Bronfman, all these other things.
But I was saying about the Victoria's Secrets, if you're a pedophile, you want to work with kids at Nickelodeon. If you're a freak, what do? You get in the underwear
That's how
business.
they're recruiting, is they're recruiting from the Victoria's Secret modeling, and
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein was claiming that he was a rep. But do you know about the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch that went down for running a sex trafficking ring?
Yeah.
He was Leslie Wexner's guy. When Leslie Wexner, he bought Abercrombie and Fitch in like 1990, maybe 91, 89. And then one of the first things he did was he put that dude into position as CEO. That was Leslie Wexner's dude. And he becomes the CEO, and he's gay, and he likes really hot young male models. And he started running a male sex trafficking ring out of Abercrombie and Fitch. So Leslie Wexner, this dude who is a self-proclaimed possessed by a demon.
What?
Yeah. Whitney has a whole chapter where she goes into this article that was done by a mainstream news source like 10, 20 years ago, where they're interviewing Leslie Wexner and asking him about how he came to power and what's his secret. It's called his D-Book, D-Y-B-U-K, and you can read about this on Wikipedia as well. And he describes in his own words that he's possessed by a D-Book, which is like a Yiddish word for a evil demon that drives him for more and more and more and more. This is in his own words.
Is he being hyperbolic? Is
A
he
little
joking
bit.
around? Like,
No.
oh, I'm possessed by a demon that just wants more and more. I just want to be successful.
No, I mean, I wasn't in the room, but I assume based upon the wording and how it's put, I assume
let's
it's like,
find it.
yeah,
We'll
it's like
find it. I want to read that.
it's like a billionaire. I mean, it's in the text. It's directly quoted in the text in One Nation Under Blackmail, actually, which is in that backpack.
One
and
Nation Under Blackmail.
One Nation Under
Is that
Blackmail by
Whitney's
Whitney
book?
Webb. Highly recommend, but it's super dense. It's a hard read. I've read it 3 times now, and I still am taking notes and trying to look things up to understand it because she's just so researched. And it's things like this where she's gone back to the original like article where they were interviewing him, and he's just like a CEO. So they're just asking him, what's your secret to success? And he's like, I'm possessed by I have a drive for more. And he chose the word D-Book, which is a Yiddish word.
So this is from New York Magazine interview.
That's
gave
exactly the
1984.
source.
He says, and now perhaps it's time to reintroduce Leslie Wexner's D-Book, the demon that always wakes up in the morning with Wexner and tweaks and pulls at him. When he was a boy, his father called it tummel, a churning. So he feels molten and unformed, pricked by these spiritual pins and needles. He met this demon again when he was 40 and already worth $500 million. When he climbed the mountain in front of the house in Vale and almost froze to death and decided to change his life. This demon he calls terminal Schwilkes, which makes him wander from house to house, repeating the pattern of his childhood on a luxurious scale, wanting more, swallowing companies larger than his own. It is precisely the reason that Wexner has $1 billion and doesn't stop at, say, $5 million and a new Mercedes every other year, and what he calls normal life. Bridge on Wednesdays and bar mitzvahs on Saturdays, and the Winding Hollow Country Club in Columbus, which is like Buckingham Palace to him when he was 15.
Yeah. So that's just to point out that, like, he's a fucking weird dude. He's a sketchy dude. He's running 2 sex trafficking rings out of his companies that he doesn't know anything about. And simultaneously, he founded, the Wexner Foundations and the Leslie Wexner Heritage Foundation. Those are also very interesting and controversial. They're very tied to Israel because he is one of the foremost Israeli philanthropists, despite being an American. But he founded what was called the Mega Group, which is it was not disclosed for a long time. It was secret. And it is a group of Jewish billionaires that get together on behalf of global Judaism, which is not uncommon, and there's nothing wrong with that if they're not committing crimes. But they would get together and meet, and it's people like Leslie Wexner, Charles Bronfman. The list is, we could look it up. And that group, it is unclear if we have proof that they were conducting espionage, but there are all of them have ties to organized crime through various elements. Like the Bronfmans were rum runners, as one example, that were then involved in the mob. Leslie Wexner is involved in these trafficking rings, et cetera. And that group seems to have been directly associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And she's one that she shows all the primary sources and like lays it all out. This is what we know, and this is where the source came from, and this is what it said, and these are possible explanations for it. Here's 1 or 2 or 3 explanations of what it might be, but we don't really know because this is as far as the evidence goes. And so Leslie Wexner is just one where there's all this swirling evidence all around him that in order for him to not be aware of what's going on and to not have been an active part of this is damn near unbelievable in my eyes, allegedly.
That's well covered. You did a good job of covering your bases there.
Yeah, which I've learned to do because I started on TikTok where you can't even say certain words or you'll get taken off of TikTok. So.
Right. Yeah, which is also fascinating.
Yeah, but like the files getting released, I am not expecting them to come out in any complete form because the mainstream understanding is that Jeffrey Epstein was the guy. Jeffrey Epstein was just an employee of these organized crime rings that work on behalf of like the CIA and Israeli Mossad and British intelligence and the whole, because organized crime is the black markets, the dark things, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, the child trafficking. And intelligence agencies were designed to be legitimate governments' point of access to organized crime. I mean, theoretically, intelligence agencies were supposed to be, Truman wanted the intelligence agencies to be a newspaper about what's going on in the world for the president to know, right? But Allen Dulles was not about that. Allen Dulles, founder of the CIA, was like, I want to do covert operations. And very immediately, covert operations were like overthrowing the government of Guatemala, Iran, buying the elections in Italy. They bought the elections in Italy by just passing giant bags of cash to the mafia so that they would just go buy the election right after World War II because they needed to not let Italy fall to the communists. It's where the Vatican is. So the CIA, though Truman okayed it, hoping that it would be a newspaper, the CIA has been covert operations from the start. And covert operations is all about public-private partnerships so that you can't have it traced back to you, right? Because if you get caught doing MK Ultra shit, the government's fucked. Right? And so what they want to do is they want to outsource MK Ultra shit or child trafficking shit or drug running shit to that shell company that's hiring that guy that works at that organized crime, right?
The same way USA does it with NGOs.
Bingo. And that is all. And so that's what the deep state is. The deep state is the conglomerate of organized crime and intelligence agencies that work in the shadows as well as the halls of power, but they're not supposed to exist and we're not supposed to know about them. But they've always existed because before we even founded the CIA during World War II, there was this bombing of this ship in a port on the eastern seaboard. The USS Liberty is confusing my memory right now. It was called Operation Underworld. There's a Wikipedia page about Operation Underworld, and there's a whole bunch more about it. Is the ship blows up in the harbor, and they were building this big new ship. It would have been in the early 40s, I believe. It was during World War II, inside of World War II, and the ship was blown up.
Here it is.
And it's not clear if it was German U-boats. There are reports that later Meyer Lansky and the mob took credit for it, low-key, but we don't really know for sure who blew it up. But when it blew up, the U.S. government got really worried that they had no way to secure the ports along the eastern seaboard because all the ports were run by the mob because the mob ran all the unions, right? And so they, rather than trying to wrestle the ports, control the ports back from the mob, they just went to the mob and said, we'll partner with you. If you guys lock down the ports, we'll let you kind of do your thing. And that's kind of what Operation Underworld is all about. Wow. And so what they did during World War II is they literally gave control over the entire eastern seaboard. I mean, I'm being facetious, but they gave control over all the ports on the eastern seaboard to the goddamn drug smugglers, like to the mob, which their favorite thing is to smuggle things. Drugs, weapons, guns, whatever. I don't know. And so before the CIA was even founded, the OSS, the intelligence agency during the wartime, was already partnering with organized crime. And the people that founded those intelligence agencies, like Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, they were corporate lawyers. And that's, can I just keep going on this? Because this is like,
Keep going.
this is,
Let him cook.
this is the thing that blew my mind, right? Is I was trying to research GameStop and shit. And then I started to realize that there's this whole monstrosity that is an official part of our government, these intelligence agencies, that when you really learn their history and read about their official history, let alone their history that sort of is still secret, it is very clear that they've been off the rails right from the start. And that's true inside of every, like, whether you're reading Legacy of Ashes and The Devil's Chessboard, very well researched official books about this shit, or if you're doing internet research. And the reason why you'd start an intelligence agency using a corporate lawyer instead of like a doctor or a military guy or something is because a corporate lawyer is already familiar with all of the big CEOs of all the big corporations, right? Allen Dulles worked at Sullivan and Cromwell as a lawyer. And so he was very familiar with IG Farben producing Zyklon B for the Nazis. He was familiar with Standard Oil. He was familiar with shipping companies and fruit companies and all these companies all around the world. And he's got good connections with them all. And so you hire one guy, Allen Dulles, and you have just hired an entire network of multinational corporations, theoretically to work on behalf of the U.S. But when you read the histories and you read what Allen Dulles was saying behind closed doors and everything, what he was doing is he was hiring the U.S. government in order to fund a corporate slush fund for corporations to utilize this power, this newly government-bestowed power, to essentially wage violence that is sanctioned. Because, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Because all those corporations, the perfect example is Guatemala. United Fruit Company had bought up all this land in Guatemala and was growing bananas like crazy. And a lot of the land was just sitting vacant. And Jacobo Arbenz comes into power, and he's like, this is bullshit. There's this American corporation that's owning all of our land, that's making all of us poor, and they're not even using a bunch of this land. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy back the land. He didn't take it. He bought it back from the United Fruit Company, and he was going to distribute it for free to all the farmers that were destitute, which is like socialist, kind of, but it's also pretty badass to use like your government money to buy all your farmers' land from this multinational corporation. But that pissed United Fruit off. And this is right as the CIA was getting founded, and United Fruit was a client of Sullivan and Cromwell. And Allen Dulles was a lawyer there, right? So United Fruit goes to Allen Dulles. His brother, John Foster Dulles, was the Secretary of State. Yeah, Secretary of State. So these two brothers that are both lawyers for Sullivan and Cromwell are the director. Well, technically Allen Dulles was not yet the director of CIA, but he was like the founder. He just had a beef with Truman and with the first couple leaderships of the president there. And so United Fruit goes to them and is like, hey, can we overthrow this piece of shit? Because he's fucking with our business, right? So this is like how corporations wanted this government-sanctioned power. And they, through those two brothers, lobbied the United States, propagandized the United States. They hired propaganda artists to propagandize them. And they painted him as a communist right at our doorstep. And then the CIA went in and through a series of kind of somewhat botched attempts called PB Success and Operation Success and Operation PB Success, they overthrew the government of Guatemala and they ousted him. They bombed Guatemala City and they got rid of him and they put in their own dictator that started 30 years of absolute devastation and like military rule and just death marked, like really dark shit that basically tore Guatemala apart on behalf of United Fruit. They did the same thing in Iran like 3 years later with Kermit Roosevelt, where it became this thing where these multinational corporations that are affiliated with this intelligence agency, just kind of through friendships and through partnerships and through the network, they started to utilize Allen Dulles and the CIA in general on their behalf to do things for the corporate interest because they are the power players in this world. They always have been the power players in this world. And they had been itching for quite some time to get that government-sanctioned ability to wage violence against anyone around the world. And we've been doing that ever since, using the intelligence agencies on behalf of the corporate blob, which is not always distinguishable from organized crime, and just going off and whacking people and overthrowing governments and starting coups, like right to this day, to like Ukraine 2014.
And they can do it without being directly connected.
So yeah, the concept
just like
of
the USA
plausible
thing.
deniability. That's the whole point.
Yes.
Is you want to set it up in a series of shells, and the darker it is, the more you have to kind of separate it, so that when Jeffrey Epstein goes down, no one knows who he worked for.
Right.
He worked for intelligence, and I was told to leave him alone.
Right.
And so you're left to speculate who he worked for, and that's why we are left to rely on sources like Whitney Webb, who's done sort of the definitive dig, because they won't fucking tell us, because a bunch of them are blackmailed. Whoa. Yeah. And it's not like it's literally a cabal of shadowy dudes around one table. It is just an alignment of many different interests, different families, different corporations, different bankers, or organized crime groups, all sort of playing games for power. And these guys have that much power and those guys have that much power. And interests tend to align. Like the general vibe in the corporations will probably align with the vibe of the bankers. And their vibe will probably align a fair bit with some of this organized crime stuff. And we'll fund this terrorist organization, Mujahideen, until it's not convenient anymore. And then we'll actually use them as a patsy to go to war because there's terrorists over there, God damn it. Right? And they've gotten quite good at kind of weaving those narratives through their operations that they've either covered up or exposed what they wanted to in various ways to kind of steer our narrative around what we know. But when you actually read the history, it's like, holy shit. It's crazy how much.
Did you ever
What's going
read
on?
Smedley Butler's War is a Racket?
Yeah, dude.
So that was 33. So in 33, it was still going on like that. And he was waking up to it as he was leaving his military career.
Do you know about the business
up,
plot,
Jamie?
about what they tried to do with him?
No. Oh, yes, I do.
The
No,
Nazi,
yeah, he
the
wanted
Nazi
to take
coup?
over the country.
No,
Yeah.
he saved the country from
Right,
it.
but they not that he
Yeah,
wanted
all the
to. They
industrialists
wanted
wanted to.
him to be a part of.
there's
taking
almost
over
a
the
Nazi
country.
coup in the 30s where we almost got taken over by our own military and became Nazis because Prescott Bush and a bunch of his other buddies were on Team Nazi, and it's because they were all funding the Nazis and they wanted to. They wanted us on that team.
And they tried to recruit Smedley Butler to be the lead of this.
Yep.
And take over the country.
I suspect. I'm sort of I'm always kind of forming my understanding research by research, but I
Here it
suspect that
is.
it was World War I where they realized how much power you can have if you're funding both sides of a war.
Look at this quote. I spent
Yeah.
33 years in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business,
Yup.
for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. Smedley Butler, 1935.
He was one of the most decorated Marines, or was he in the Army, of all time? General?
Unfucking believable.
Yes. War is a Racket is a relatively short book that anyone can buy online,
Yeah.
and I highly recommend it to everyone. That paired with
But that's so wild that was 33.
oh yeah, and it's still going on to this day.
And the general public hasn't even had a whisper of this. Like the average normie, probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
when did this start making it into the zeitgeist? Obviously in films. It was
I
always,
think when Elon bought Twitter.
right.
And it's still not making it into the mainstream zeitgeist, but and you've played a big part in this too, this whole decentralized media space. As technology naturally walks forward, I think that we're living in this world where all these rich people, all these evil controlling sickos of varying degrees, they come from a world where they could control everything. They could control the newspapers, they could buy out the press, they could pay for journalists.
Yes.
And that strategy walked itself into technology, and suddenly technology is just naturally walking forwards, and this just changes the game. Like, you can't use those old strategies when you have a phone and internet and social media, and we're watching the cognitive sort of breakdown of their old ways that they don't know how to adapt, and it's just scheme after scheme after scheme is crumbling.
Right.
And the secret is just free speech. That's all you need, is free speech and communication on the internet.
and Doge.
Yeah. Doge is how you actually go after it.
But you need someone who's pretty balls out.
Oh, yeah.
You need a guy like Elon that has.
I was glad that Elon said the stuff about assassination on the
Yeah.
podcast the other day, because that needs to be said, is that they are taking great risk. Even Pam and Cash, all of them, are taking great risk
Yes.
to do this. And it would not be the first time that someone's spouse had been whacked, or someone's kids had been threatened, or like they'd created a scandal. Like, do you know about the scandal of the Chappaquiddick Bridge with
Chappaquiddick.
Chappaquiddick with
Chappaquiddick.
Ted Kennedy? It was,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That is such a great illustration of how, like, it might not even be you that they go after. It might be just, there's all sorts of ways that if you do the wrong thing, allegedly, they might come after people around you.
Yeah.
And so people like Cash and Pam and RFK are taking on a lot of risk. And that's also why I think that like my following is real conspiratorial usually. Like I'm moderate compared to most of my people. And there's a lot of suspicion of these guys right now of like they must already be controlled if they can even get in there. It's like I don't know.
I don't know about that because
I don't buy that.
I used to think. Well, listen, I think there's definitely some manipulation of voting. Okay, I'll say that.
Oh yeah, that's the holy grail. You can't say, dude.
Yeah, I say it. I say it because I think. Listen, at some level for sure. Now let's talk about the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah.
Now, when you have 51 former intelligence agents claiming that this is Russian disinformation, and then you have the government getting it removed, Twitter complying, you can't even post a link for the fucking New York Post.
Yep.
Like the second oldest newspaper in the country, right? Legitimate newspaper.
When the FBI had the laptop already. Like,
Right. So that, in the time of an election, is election interference.
Straight up.
So that is manipulation of voting.
Yeah,
That
until Trump came in, that was the only election interference that I was willing to talk about because it was very provable, very obvious.
Another obvious portal, which is California and New York won't even allow you to show your ID when you vote.
Yep.
There's only one reason why you would do that, because you want people voting that shouldn't be voting, and you want it to count because you want to win.
Yep.
Right?
And more we're seeing that they are literally importing voters and paying them with government money.
Yes.
With like to huge amounts of money when we have homeless veterans on the street.
FEMA
we have
funds.
Over 300,000 children are missing that have crossed our border that we have delivered to unknown sponsors.
Well, I think the Trump administration very quickly, within the first couple of weeks, found 90,000 of them. I don't know what the number is now.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, there was some. See if you can find that. The Trump administration accounted for. They started looking.
I know, right?
The first fucking, the first administration is like, I don't know where it is. The Biden administration
let's close the border and.
Well, we can't close the border. That's wrong.
Yeah.
The whole thing
they
was.
They literally locked up the guys that built the border wall, Steve Bannon and it was Steve Bannon and Dustin Stockton and I think one or two other people. When they wouldn't build it, these guys just went out and raised millions of dollars on their own, and they literally just started building border wall. Do you know about that?
I'd heard something.
I didn't know about that
those
either.
lines.
And then I now do a podcast every couple weeks with Dustin Stockton, who's a whole trip of a guy. And he started telling me the story of like, what are you saying? I had no idea that they had literally just started building it from a private citizen standpoint until they arrested them.
Did you know that also before the election, all the border materials were for sale?
Yep.
They sold the border materials.
Yep. They were just trying to get everything out as fast as they could. They were deleting files and just giving out aid money and announcing more and more foreign war aid to Ukraine and Israel and everything.
They said it was like throwing gold off the Titanic.
Crazy, dude. Yeah. Yeah. And I am really excited for everything that's going to come out, but I'm also
what were we before we go any further?
I'm reading into the kids. It's it's definitely a political thing.
Oh, the children are actually missing. BBC, go fuck yourself.
Well, this says that they had them, I guess, in records, and then when they sent court notices out, they just don't come to their court date, so they consider them missing.
Okay, that can make sense. But I think the Trump administration accounted for quite a few of them.
Well, that part I don't know. That's what they're saying.
You're not going to find them on BBC.
Well, I'm just all right. That's
So I work.
So
where would you like me to go?
Don't put that. Trump administration finds missing kids. Try that.
Yeah, because I work with this guy named Ryan Mata who spent 3 years of his life going to the border with his own dollars and filming documentaries about this and interviewing the people that rescue trafficked children and actually interviewing whistleblowers from within the Biden regime's trafficking scheme, like the people that were dropping kids off with sponsors
Bottom
and
one,
stuff.
Sean fucked.
Sean Fuchs.
But listen to what it says there. The Trump administration is allegedly located between 75,000, 80,000 of the 300,000 missing migrant children, according to Harris Faulkner of Fox News.
This is without a link to a source.
Okay,
yeah,
but
source,
just
trust me, bro.
Just Google Harris.
Right,
I understand, but Google Harris Faulkner.
I would
Fox
love
News,
for that to happen.
Harris Faulkner.
I mean, I suspect that
Fox News.
Every single. There's every incentive for Trump to find them and to do something about it. But I think the vast majority of them are dead, unfortunately.
So that's a Facebook link.
I mean,
And this is the
what
thing is
pops
that there
up.
are certain topics that are so disinformationalized and so sensationalized that when you start to research into them, you realize you're inside of this media madness that it's so hard to find the truth. And
Right.
COVID was one of those, and
Yeah.
J6 was one of those, the elections was one of those.
Yeah.
And when you find that, it becomes, for me, it sets a bell off. Is A, I'm in something I should learn about, but B, I have to be very careful. And I don't know, and you never know what you can trust in those spaces. And so that's where I change my switches for what to believe, and I kind of open up the bandwidth in terms of take it all in, but be very skeptical, because that's where you get wild conspiracy theories that are unproven, and trust me, and then you also get all kinds of propaganda trying to obfuscate the narrative. And,
Yeah, that's a
right?
big factor that people need to be aware of is purposeful misinformation
Oh,
that
yeah.
gets inserted into a narrative to make that narrative ridiculous.
Yep.
They've
And
done
there's
that.
whole conspiracy theories that
Yeah.
I think are like that, and Q might be one of them. I don't know.
could
I think
be.
flat Earth is one of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think flat Earth was someone did that as a goof, and then they couldn't believe how much it took.
Yeah, right.
But
I
if
mean-
you can speak well and you're articulate and you have compelling things that you're saying, and there's no counter, there's no scientist going stop.
Yeah.
We can show you in fucking 10 minutes that the Earth is round. Everything in the sky is round. The Earth is the only thing that's not round. You know, the weirdness of it is how much people want to believe that everything's bullshit.
Yeah.
And so you could trick a certain
I mean, I
number
get
of people.
why. Like, think
Oh,
about
yeah.
how much. Like, right. So, 10 years ago, Alex Jones was saying that the whole government's controlled by pedophiles, and he was a psychopath. Or I guess more than 10 years ago now. And then Jeffrey Epstein got caught.
Dude, I talked to people about it back then.
Right.
And they thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
Alex
you were
Jones
a
was
nut.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a fucking island. They take them to an island. They get them fucked up
There's
on
more
drugs.
than one
They
island,
film
too.
it.
There's been a few islands.
Yeah, you think that's the only place
No,
they do
no,
that?
no. Yeah.
There's probably some super secret place in China that they all go to. Or,
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all over
Siberia.
Mexico. They're all over, like,
Jesus.
yeah, imagine what is in Mexico. The government of Mexico has been partnered with the cartels for at least 2 administrations, is what it looks like. And the cartels are just, like, running that whole game, that whole sort of northwestern, like, quarter of Mexico. I can only
No.
imagine what we'll find down there.
Really hilarious is the Blue Anon Twitter people,
Oh,
the
dude.
kooky ones who are like, yeah, you're going to go after the cartel. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. The greatest military force the world has ever known versus drug runners. Are
Which,
you
to
out of
be
your fucking
fair,
mind?
the cartels are highly militarized and they're
Sure.
extremely advanced, but
Sure.
yeah, they're not going to compete with
They-
us. No.
I had my friend Evan Hafer on here from Black Rifle Coffee, and he
Yeah.
was talking about, like, do you understand the kind of, like, these are very capable people, no doubt. Do you understand the kind of ultra violence that they will experience if they let these,
Yeah.
you know, fucking SEAL team guys go after the cartel people?
Because those
How
are proud
insane that would be.
Americans that have been itching to defend our nation. Like, they have been itching for the ability to actually do something meaningful.
And that's also the place where, look, Afghanistan doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Oh,
to
it was
send
an
military.
opium operation.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that too. We can get to that.
Oh, yeah.
But it doesn't make sense that we would send troops over there. It makes sense that we would send troops after the cartels. If you think about the
Absolutely.
amount of death that occurs in the United States because of fentanyl overdoses, where you have tainted drugs that are coming in across the border and killing people left at unprecedented
Children,
levels.
like taking kids
yeah.
from families. My whole
Oh, yeah.
generation was devastated by it. My whole generation.
Everyone today knows someone who died of an overdose.
Yep.
Everyone does. That
Yep.
was very uncommon when I was in high school.
And the problem is that it was not just illegal fentanyl and illegal heroin. The problem is that the Sackler family and the pharmaceutical industry was in on it. And so doctors were prescribing it to normal people. And it was just devastating our whole population all at once. It's so tragic.
that painkiller documentary on Netflix
Yeah,
is fucking
dude.
or the docudrama series.
Yeah, and so the administration now in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, she is like the protege of AMLO, who was the leader of that same party from before, and I think he served 2 terms. It's like, so it's been something like the last 6 to 8 years or something. Their official cartel policy is hugs, not bullets. And what they basically describe is we're causing more death by going after the cartel, and we'll just agree to not touch them. We'll just agree to leave them alone. And I'm kind of exaggerating again, but like that, hugs, not bullets is their official slogan for their policy about the cartels. So it makes sense for us to fucking do something. It's like, we'll do the bullets. You can keep your hugs. Thank you very much. Right?
I wonder what's going to happen with that. Because they did declare them a terrorist organization.
Yeah. I mean, I was worried. I kind of came out a little hot and I posted something on Twitter that was like, no fucking drone strikes inside of the U.S. No, sir. No, you're not. because the way that the sort of announcement was worded of like, we're declaring cartel members terrorist organizations and we will be and drone strikes are like totally A-okay on that is what someone was saying about it. And I was like, where's the line on allowing the targeting of cartel? Because once you start targeting terrorists, that's why 9/11 was so subversive, is it turned everyone into a possible enemy of the state that can be shipped off to Guantanamo, because terrorism is just this elusive concept.
Right.
And anyone can just become a terrorist if we just call them a terrorist. Propaganda.
And there was
can do
people
that.
shipped off to Guantanamo who were definitely innocent.
100%.
And did time and got released.
Oh yeah.
You want to radicalize someone? Send them to Guantanamo Bay for a decade for something they didn't do.
Right. And the you brought up the Hunter Biden laptop and those 51 intelligence agents. I wanted to look into it. So I looked at the letter itself and I actually read the letter. And on the letter at the bottom, they all signed it. And if you just start Googling the people that signed it, the very first two names were ex-directors of the CIA that lied to us about Guantanamo Bay and lied to us about surveilling American citizens and lied on the stand. And so they're professional liars that are from the intel agencies that are saying, oh, no, like Hunter Biden's all good, above board.
Jeez.
It's like, why would we ever trust that? But that's how powerful spin is. When every media article parrots that, no, it wasn't made in a lab. There's no evidence it was made in a lab. That couldn't be true.
Yeah.
Everyone just believes it because we want to believe that that's how the world is.
We used to. Don't you think that over the last 4 years, COVID was probably the biggest wake-up call ever for people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was my wake-up call. I was a leftist that didn't think about shit before COVID.
Me too.
No, you thought about shit. You just didn't think about
I thought
that
about shit, but I was pretty much a leftist.
Totally.
And then
100%.
I was like, oh, this is fake.
Yep. And to
This
be
whole
fair,
thing's fake.
I think we're kind of both still sort of leftists, what left should be.
Socially progressive.
We need, because politics is supposed to be a balance. We
Right.
need regulation of corporations. That's a leftist ideology.
Yes.
But we need individual liberty. And we're supposed to have a balance of the two.
Yes.
And I think my theory is that it used to be easier to control the right because it was a big money party and you could go to war with them and you could lead us around by the right. But as technology came in, they realized it was way easier to spin narratives to the collectivists. And if you can get all the collectivists, the leftists, to go along with the narrative, that's way more effective than these individual liberty people with the guns.
Well, also you're controlling all the universities if you have
Bingo.
the leftists. You have the narrative that you essentially program the culture as it then leaves the universities and enters into the workforce.
The most ignorant people ready to be programmed coming in. I mean, that's always how communist revolutions have been programmed.
Well, we were talking about this with Jordan Peterson, where people were saying, what is the big deal? This is like 2015, 2016, when Jordan Peterson first started, and when Brett Weinstein first started emerging.
Yep.
And before that, I was talking about these crazy things that were going on in universities, and people were like, why are you paying attention to these fringe things that kids are doing? I'm like, they're going to graduate. These are the people. These aren't the people who 30 years ago were studying in school, trying to figure out what career to get into and job. No, they want to change the world with activism now. Everyone wants to be an activist in every job you take. Everything you take is supposed to enact social justice.
Yep.
That is supposed to be and then you're given this as like your social credit system when you're in the universities, and then you leave. Like, I still want to be the good person. I still want to be the person that everybody applauds. I will do the right thing. I will say the right things. And then you get DEI in the workforce. Like, oh, great, it's all here now. We're all together.
And in a world with no meaning, where like life is meaningless for 99% of the population, you give them meaning, and they will cling to that till
you're
they
on the
die.
good team now. You're on a team.
Yeah.
You're on a team.
And I
of
understand
people.
it because I come from that. I come from one of the most liberal cities in this fucking country.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, COVID's happening, and I was taking it really seriously. Like, my last Facebook post was like, all young people, we should lock down and take this really fucking seriously. And then all my roommates were like, hey, let's go down to Seattle and do the BLM protests. And I'm like, whoa, like, you're a mask Nazi. You're like on me about my masking, and you're trying to go burn down Seattle in a group of like 100,000 people? What? And so they all went down to Seattle, and I'm back at home. And I mean, I still love them to death. Like, if they watch this, like, no shade to them. Like, but I'm at home watching the live streams of the BLM protests, and I'm like, where'd that pallet of bricks come from?
Right.
And that got me thinking.
Where'd that pallet of bricks come from? Over and over and over again. And there's all these explanations. Well, there's a construction site.
Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you something about construction sites. Bricks are fucking expensive. They don't leave bricks laying around like that because people would steal them and take them to their construction sites. That shit happens all the time. If you leave copper piping on a construction site
Bingo.
overnight, people just steal
Especially
that shit.
downtown where there's meth heads everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah,
Why you
and-
got a basket of fucking bricks?
No. And so then the thing is, I start asking a question. I ask one question in that leftist environment, and it's just like, "Bah!" don't ask questions. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fucking out of here.
Well,
And that's what
Chase
got me
Hughes was
started.
talking about that when he was talking about COVID. Like, what are the ways you can clearly see that something is a psyop? First, you're
Yep.
not allowed to question anything.
Yep. 100%. And questions are met with like obey the herd, like and they demonize you, and they don't ever attack the
Yeah.
arguments. They don't ever engage with the arguments.
No.
And that's what I love about the job that I've fallen into as a sort of like researcher, is that I have no problem with being wrong. My favorite moments in my career so far have been when someone's proved me wrong, and I've been like, oh shit, thanks, bro. I didn't know that. I'm going
Right.
to research that and look it up, because some people can get trapped in their ego and need to stay on some hill and die there.
Right.
But like, that's retarded. You don't need to do that. It's a progress for intelligence, for like learning. That's what the Academy of Ideas was built on, right?
Right.
And so having this culture of censorship and of herd mentality, especially in the universities, is the most toxic thing to our national future you could ever incorporate.
Yeah, it's a perfect thing that a foreign company or a foreign government would do
Yep.
to the United States in order to ruin us. And this is what Yuri Bezmenov talked about in the 1980s.
Bingo. That's such a formative speech to watch.
That speech is
Everyone should
crazy.
watch that speech.
And it's ironically in 1984
Yeah.
that he's saying this.
Well, I mean, these tactics are old. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they go, and I more and more started to look at like, we changed from kinetic warfare at the atom bomb to like psyop and subversive and information warfare. And we were still doing kinetic warfare, but it was all these little proxy wars that were based on propaganda and like in order to spin narratives, in order to get support. And more as technology has evolved, one of my kind of shticks is that the warfare is information warfare now, because what they need to do is they need to convince everyone that COVID is real and that you need to lock down and you need to wear your mask and you need to take the vaccine so we can profit. And all of that is information.
Yeah.
And that changes it from soldiers fighting soldiers to government agencies, or rather NGOs and all these conglomerates of money, like groups, essentially targeting all of us, and we
Yes.
become the targets of that warfare. And so it's on us to get educated and
What's
to learn.
fun though is when they try to spin a narrative to try to cover up their tracks, and it just winds up exposing more people to what's actually
Yep.
going on. One of my favorite ones was when Geraldo Rivera was in Afghanistan going through the poppy fields with the United States military guarding
I don't
the
think I've
poppy
seen
fields.
this.
You never seen this?
I know what you're talking about, but I don't think I've
It's-
seen it.
Amazing.
Yup.
It's amazing because he's in full propaganda gaslight mode.
Mm-hmm.
And he's explaining why it's important to protect these poppy fields because these
This
farmers,
is their livelihood.
we're protecting them from the
These
Taliban.
poor farmers.
We have to help these people.
Because the Taliban shut down the opium production. The Taliban outlawed opium production and burned all the fields and got rid of it all.
So he's literally talking to this officer in front of the poppy fields. You see these guys with
That's
fucking
crazy.
machine guns guarding
US
the poppy
military, right?
Yes. Why? Play this.
Oh my God.
Play this.
We're going to head to Afghanistan this morning. One of the biggest obstacles
Let's go.
This
in front of
morning.
US troops there
We're
in
gonna head to
Afghanistan is the
Afghanistan.
opium trade. The Taliban is using it to intimidate the population.
Joining us from Helmand Province is Geraldo Rivera. Good morning to you, Geraldo. Tell us what you've seen during your days there in Afghanistan.
Hi, Allison, Dave, and Clayton. Yes, in some ways, the Marines' brilliantly executed invasion of Marja, this town in the middle of Helmand province, was the easy part. The hard part now is governing this province, a province, as you suggest, that has become addicted to opium in many, many ways. That is the principal crop that is being grown here. The Taliban lend the farmers the money. They are indebted to the Taliban. They have to grow the opium. Now the Marines, in their success, are in a sense a victim of their success, because now the population is, they have these opium fields, and we are tolerating it. We are tolerating the cultivation of the opium because we know that if we were to destroy it now, the population would turn against the Marines, and it would be a real security risk. Let me introduce Lieutenant Colonel Brian
Wow.
Christmas. He's the commanding officer.
You really
of the
can't
3rd
make this
Battalion
up.
of
It gets
Marines.
better.
Really a wonderful group of Marines here. I know that you care deeply about this contradiction, the fact that here you have one of the best fighting forces in the world ever mounted, and in a sense you're watching as this opium is being grown. I know it grinds at your gut. How do you deal with it? What are you doing about it?
Well, frankly, this is a part of their culture. So while it might grind in my gut, it's what they do. We provide them security. We're providing them.
He was given
resources.
very
We're
strict
providing them
orders that morning.
Alternatives
Yeah.
are different crops to grow. They're getting the seed and the fertilizer.
They're getting
to do it.
different crops. Grow
They can-
tomatoes, guys.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you can grow apples.
My favorite statistic about that era is that I'm going to get the number wrong, but opium is only grown in so many places, right? And
Right.
it used to be in the Vietnam region in Southeast Asia, the Golden Triangle. Then it changed to the Golden Crescent, which is Afghanistan. And when that era happened, it was something like 70%, 80% of the world's opium supply was coming from Afghanistan. And if you just do a little math and think it through, you realize that we have this gigantic opioid market of legal opioids, of the Sackler family and all these pharma companies. And you realize that it's physically impossible for them not to be in on this scheme, because where are they growing their opium? They're not growing it here. They're not growing it in like Africa. So it, like, by definition, when you just think through what's going on here, you realize that some of those opium fields are illegal heroin and some of those opium fields are big pharma.
It coincides with the opioid crisis
Direct
in America.
one-to-one, dude.
The pharmaceutical grade prescribed opioid crisis in America, as it goes up. And then you see at one point in time, Afghanistan was responsible for 94% of the world's opium.
Bingo. There's the stat.
While we
Bingo.
are occupying. Now it's Myanmar, which also just went through a military coup.
Yep. I mean, they've always got to control. So opium has been one of the most important crops to control ever since the British Empire and like the days of tall ships.
Yeah.
You know about the opium wars with China?
Yes.
That was a
yes,
funny
yes.
history to learn about.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, because that's the thing is that I've been basically learning everything from scratch as I've gone because I didn't know shit. I was just
How
like
many
going
years you been in
snowboarding.
this?
Less than two.
That's so crazy.
I mean, like I
You-
was learning
you've done
before
so well.
that.
You must be a plant.
I
You
know,
must be
right?
some sort of an operative.
I'm a
but it's
Mossad
like,
agent.
You're just good at it. Just, if you're good at it, if you're Whitney Webb or if you're you or
It's
any of
just
those
a
people.
scientific process of having the right degree of like understanding of just like the right amount of like need to see primary sources and real evidence and the ability to look and test a hypothesis and see what comes out and not being attached to one conclusion beyond what the evidence actually suggests.
Also, not being afraid to seem foolish to the uninformed.
Absolutely.
Because so many people will dismiss most of what we've talked about today.
Yeah.
Offhand.
Yeah.
Without any, especially people that only consume the Wall Street Journal
Yep.
and mainstream media.
But I had the benefit of being a normie when I started, and so I walked my way in piece by piece.
So you
And,
know how they
like
think,
I started
too.
with all the BlackRock conspiracy theories.
Right.
I started with who owns the media, who owns the tampon aisle, who owns all these things. And I would go into the grocery stores and do the videos in the grocery stores where I would like go to the cereal aisle and be like, who owns all these cereals? And it turns out the entire cereal aisle is 3 companies. And I mean, the tampon aisle is even better because they're all getting sued for having reprotoxic chemicals in the tampons.
Right.
Meaning they'll kill your reproductive system. And
Well, not only that, toxic shock syndrome.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so that sort of, I like walked myself slowly into learning and I walked my audience along with me. And I also developed this understanding of, I mean, I used to be a teacher. And so I have this a certain understanding of like, how do you communicate in a way that's speaking from their perspective instead of from my perspective? Which right now I'm just talking to you instead of talking to them because it's more fun.
Right.
But when I actually make my videos, I do my best to try to put myself in the shoes of who I'm trying to access and what do they know and what do I need to communicate and show evidence of for them
Right.
to understand that like you can look into this and check my sources.
Yeah.
And you can think about this. You have permission to think about this.
You do a very good job of citing your sources and telling people where to look if they want to find out more information about it too, because a lot of it is a real big deep dive. And
It's the most important part,
It's also,
by far.
It's like unless you're a person who does it for a living, like the amount of time that it takes
Yep.
to find out about this stuff, and then even you, who's been in for 2 years doing this, like there's decades of layers you need to uncover,
Exactly.
and it'll take forever. Like Whitney Webb's been doing it for how long?
Oh, I don't even know.
Alex
dude.
Jones has been in the game for 30 plus years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's still always more to learn and always more to connect. And we get new information that puts new light on old situations. It just it's this constant rearranging game of understanding. And I just love that. I mean, yeah, most people don't have time for all of it, but as we're sort of stratifying into this ecosystem of content of like creators and journalists and thinkers, that we're all kind of collectively doing the work together. And some of us are more integral than others. Some of us are just clickbaiters, and some of us are like, I'm somewhere in the middle. And then you get some people that are really professional about it, like problematically professional about it, like they can only get so much done.
Have you ever looked into the Oklahoma City bombing?
No, not much actually, not hardly at all.
that's
But
a
I know
good
it's one that's like
That's a
one of
good
those
one.
seminal moments.
That's a good one. First
Yeah.
of all, the amount of damage to the building is not something that you would get from a fertilizer bomb. And the way a fertilizer bomb would work in front of the building, that building's blown out.
Exactly.
And the FBI was retrieving unblown bombs from the building.
Interesting.
Not only that, the whole Timothy McVeigh thing is fucking wild. When you go down the rabbit hole and start looking into it, it seems like a false flag. It seems like someone else planted bombs inside that building and they blamed it on this fertilizer bomb.
What would that false flag have taken us to? Like, what did it achieve?
They passed different gun laws and different laws afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, 9/11 is the perfect example of that kind of false flag of this thing that's crazy that has all these questions that get covered up, and then we just go to war in the Middle East with a country
and
that
we have the Patriot Act and the Patriot Act 2.
All
and
the
now
spying,
NDAA.
cover up all the missing money, all these things.
Incredible amounts of control and surveillance now gets used on the population.
Who do you think did 9/11? Or like what conglomerate of groups do you think were involved?
Well, for sure, the Saudis were involved, right?
I mean, a lot of the people were Saudi.
A lot of the people were Saudi.
I don't know if that necessarily means that the Saudi government had anything to do with it.
It could mean it was just people that were recruited by another organization that were with the Saudis. What do you think happened at Tower 7?
I think that's a good question.
That's a weird one,
I think
right?
the Tower
because you
7
find out
had
what's
information in it
Yes.
about both. I think it probably had information in it about the planning of the attack and or what was going on with the attack. But I also think it had information about other things that needed to go away. Maybe it's old CIA operations. Maybe it's banking information.
Maybe it's information about the trillions of dollars that was missing that Donald Rumsfeld talked about the day before 9/11.
Yep.
So he gives a press conference in front of the Pentagon. Was the Pentagon? Is that what it was?
I don't know where the
gives
press conference was. I mean, I think it was in a room, but I'm not sure.
So he gives this press conference. This press conference, he says there's trillions of dollars they can't account for. And everybody's like, what the fuck? The very next day, 9/11 happens. And in one of the buildings where they store data, that building mysteriously implodes like a controlled demolition. That like no building has ever collapsed ever just because of fire.
I mean,
and structural damage for sure, but it's the way it collapses.
Even from planes hitting buildings, no building has ever collapsed like that. Other planes have hit buildings.
Right.
Bombs have gone off in buildings. All sorts of stuff has happened to buildings, and they don't fall down like the main towers did, let alone Building 7.
Right. It's all real weird. At the very least, if that was my building, I'd be like, I'm suing. You guys made a shit building.
Yeah, except that he took out special insurance against plane crashes and against terrorism right before it.
But you would take out insurance against terrorism because that place had already been the victim of a bombing.
It had been.
I mean, that was in the Biggie song. Blow up like the World Trade.
Yup, classic move.
Yeah.
Talking about Biggie, Diddy is on the menu. But it's important to mention, as we're getting into all these like government conspiracy theories and like CIA did it, Israel did it, Saudi did it, no one's saying ever, unless you're dumb, that the whole government of any of these countries did it. Like when you say, like people, it's like in the anti-Israel crowd, people get smeared a lot for like, as though you're claiming that all of Israel did 9/11 or all of Israel did this thing. Or when you're talking about the CIA, it's more obvious when you're talking about the CIA. We're not saying that the whole CIA did something.
Right.
We're saying that these groups, these covert intelligence agencies, they are fertile ground for walled off areas of need to know information behind levels of security clearances where plots can be hatched. And they always have been. That's the whole fucking point of an intelligence agency, is to hatch plots.
Right.
It's unreal that they would hatch such an evil and fucked up plot.
Right.
But it happened. And you only need to do it. I mean, 9/11 happened when I was in like grade school, and I remember all like where I was and all that shit. And that was the seed that just sort of sat under the ground until, BLM, that eventually sprouted for me of like, I always knew there was something weird. And I saw Zeitgeist when I was way younger. And so I knew that like there's weird shit in this world, but I was a leftist that just wanted to go snowboarding and stuff. So I didn't really think about it until it walked into my city and told me to stay inside and get a jab and all sorts of shit. So they really fucked up with that one.
They really fucked up
Big
with
time.
that one. Well, I think they thought they had us. Because I think
they did.
All the people that are in power are operating on a paradigm that existed before the internet.
Exactly. Yep. Do you know Mickey Willis at all?
No.
Do you know the Plandemic films at all?
No.
Oh, dude, you should really check them out. Yeah, he's around this area, and I had not seen them before. Plandemic 1 was this doctor named Judy Mikovits that blew the whistle really early on, and that is one of the things that got all this, like the fact that you haven't heard of it and seen it is
No, I've heard of it.
Exactly.
I've heard of it.
Is they
I just
like,
haven't
locked
seen
it down.
But I was so balls deep in the COVID thing that I didn't want to see anything more because it was me.
Yup.
I was a part
You
of
were
it.
a part of that censorship.
Yeah.
She got that same kind of treatment of like smear campaigns left and right and just
The smear
hatred
campaign
and,
against me, though, was so eye-opening.
Yeah.
When you know that something's not true that's being said on CNN over and over and over
about
again.
yourself.
About yourself. And then they take your face and they make you green.
He's
was-
taking horse paste.
It was so crazy to watch and to be a part of that it was like, wow, I'll never trust again. Because now I
Eye-opening.
know you guys are full of shit.
And that was a big thing that red pilled a lot of regular people, like myself included. And a good example of like my take on that is I didn't know about ivermectin beforehand. So I didn't even just like be like, oh, Joe Rogan said. I was like, fuck it, I'll look it up. They said that it was an award-winning medication. I'll find the goddamn award that they got for it.
Yeah.
So I looked it up and I found it. It's like, okay, cool. That
Well,
makes,
not only that, I said a bunch of stuff I took. They
Yeah.
only locked on to this horse paste thing.
Well, because ivermectin is a great threat to their profit. They
Yes.
can't make money off of
Right.
it, and it works very, very well if you get it early enough.
But imagine they ignored all the other stuff I took. I said I took IV vitamins, I took prednisone, I took Z-Pak, I took monoclonal antibodies.
I have a theory about that. And it's that they can't get an emergency use authorization if there is a drug that can be considered a cure, like a preventative,
A treatment.
a treatment,
Just
right?
a treatment,
And
yeah.
so and I mean, you've said this many times, right? Is they needed to axe all treatments because the one that they went with was administered IV post, like in the hospital, and it was very, very expensive. Remdesivir is a whole super fucking dark rabbit
Causes
hole.
kidney failure.
Oh yeah, and they knew that full well. They had already tested it out in Africa. And RFK's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, opened my eyes in a big way.
In mine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he still has not been sued.
No, I was very skeptical about him before I read that book because they had done a great job of connecting him to fringe conspiracies and making him look like a kook. He's the one Kennedy that's out of his mind.
Yep.
And
And
he
it had been
thinks that
long
they should
enough
ban
since
the
he was not a
vaccines.
kook because he
Right.
started doing the vaccine stuff for these moms that were coming to him with vaccine injured kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not trying to do vaccine stuff, but he saw these kids and was like, I need to fight for these people.
And he had been spending time talking about mercury poisoning because he was an environmental attorney and he had successfully sued all these corporations that were dumping into rivers. He cleaned up the East River. I mean, he did so much great work as an environmental attorney that people forget about because they did such a good job. And again, this is before social media and the internet. Like you could do a great job of smearing someone and making them look nuts. Remember Jenny McCarthy? They smeared the shit out of Jenny McCarthy because she was suggesting that her child changed after her child was vaccinated. And her child got autism.
Bingo.
And this is when they were doing the multi-vaccines in one day and dosing kids up. And they made her look like a fucking idiot, and they removed her from Hollywood. She essentially got blacklisted.
That's the story, right? There are certain narratives that are golden cows that you cannot touch, and the
Well, that
vaccine
was
industry has always been one of them.
The thing about that one is we all would agree. I would have agreed. If you got a hold of me 6 years ago and asked me about vaccines, like they're one of the most important inventions in human history. And then you read, have you ever read Dissolving Illusions?
No.
Read that book. Mm-hmm. All of those diseases had dropped off because of sanitation and nutrition.
Yeah, I've seen the graphs.
Yeah, they all had dropped off. And then the vaccines
Measles
come along.
included, speaking of the current thing
Which
that's
is
a controversy.
an infection that everyone got when I was a kid. And what happened was you'd get sick for a few days and then you'd be immune for life.
Yep.
Yeah. And they were making it look like everyone's dying from measles. Like, no, if you're dying from measles, you're sick. You're already compromised, which is exactly what happened with COVID, where 90% of the people who died had 4+ comorbidities.
Yep.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Which is why it was such a red pill for me, because I was like literally an ultra marathon runner that was going to the gym like 3 hours a day. I'm like, I need natural immunity. I already have natural immunity. Go fuck yourselves.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And the reason why I was talking about Mickey Willis and Plandemic is because the second Plandemic is called Indoctrination. And it's basically a magnum opus about how the vaccine industry, this golden cow, is not just like, it's not just one thing or this thing or one thing. It's a organized like group of profit takers that has been growing for decades. And Bill Gates, and he like lays out how Bill Gates got into it and is on camera saying how many profits he's made off of vaccines and how great of a business model vaccines are. And vaccines as a concept great concept, but it is so lucrative if manipulated and corrupted that really evil people started to do really evil things with it.
Also, you have complete immunity to liability.
Yeah. Well, they got that orchestrated partway through that sequence because they were starting to get sued like fucking crazy.
Right.
Because there was all kinds of injuries. And so
This
that's
is
how
the
they
Reagan
lobbied that.
administration, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reagan passed that act.
They got to stop that. You can't just give people immunity because then they lie. They lie so they can sell more
Exactly.
stuff. And then they get caught like they did with Vioxx and they only pay a
Dude,
percentage
such
of
a
the
crime.
profits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just that you can't give them immunity, it's that you cannot just punish with fines. You have to punish with prison time. Because if you don't punish with prison time, it will never change. That's true of the drug industry. That's true of our corrupt government officials that are like, for example, the person that was withholding these Epstein documents from Pam Bondi and she fired him. No. Put him on a stand and at least give him a trial to make sure he didn't commit treason or something else, right? And maybe he's fine and you let him go and he's just fired. But like if you're not going to send the Epstein clients to prison, if you're just going to like fine a couple people, like 2008 banking collapse, we'll fine all the bankers a little bit and we'll just put one little pawn of a banker in jail. That's why we have this crazy fucking, like 2008 was horrible, but it was by no means the last market crash that we're having. Because no one ever went to jail. They just switch their tactics around and get ready for the next profit-taking event.
Yeah, and they've already paid everybody off so that they get preferable treatment.
Yep.
And this is exactly what happens to the pharmaceutical drug companies. When they get caught, they just pay fines. They don't go to jail. They killed 50, 60,000 people with Vioxx.
The thing about white-collar crime is it's real profitable and there's no consequences.
And they have the media because they sponsor the media.
Bingo. Yep.
And
usually they're in bed with these intelligence agencies and organized crime aspects in some small ways or sometimes really big ways, like in the case of the opium fields, where they're clearly getting their opium from these poppy fields, and clearly they are interfacing with the illegal drug trades, at least on some level. Not necessarily saying they're collaborating, but they're certainly like getting it from the same suppliers. It's really
the idea
dark.
that they're not is crazy.
Yeah.
The idea that you're going to have 94% of the world's opium and you're just going to ignore it while you're occupying the country with a military force and guarding the fields. Shut the fuck up.
Especially considering, so that was George W. Bush, right? But George H.W. Bush, this is a one that's not totally declassified yet, but I've been digging deep into it. I got a whole bunch of documents on it, and it's kind of declassified, is that during Vietnam era, we were managing all of the opium production and the heroin production in Laos and in the surrounding area. And it was being sold to American service members to make money for the CIA for black operations. And that was George H.W. Bush. That was his time. That's why his nickname is Poppy. It's not because he's like the dad. It's because he was brought into that organization with Richard Helms.
No way. That's the reason why his name... Oh, no.
That's why his nickname is Poppy. And that is
God.
still not mainstream CIA like disclosure news. There's a whole fucking rabbit hole about it. Like, it is kind of disclosed that we were involved in that drug trade somewhat, but it's not disclosed that's why all the Vietnam veterans came home addicted to heroin, because the CIA was selling heroin to them and to a lot of other parts of the world in order to raise funds for their black budget operations, because the CIA has always had trouble funding all their operations ever since the start. Which is also
what they did with crack cocaine in Los Angeles.
Bingo.
With Freeway Ricky Ross.
It's all tied in. So Bill Casey, Bill Colby rather, who put that all together, he was in the heroin operations in Vietnam, and he was like a little lower down and not running it. And then as he grew up and came to power in the CIA, and those other guys that were more competent, Richard Helms being the primary one, Richard Helms and H.W. Bush, they were not involved when he went off on his own and tried to set up the cocaine smuggling. And that's why he bungled it so fucking bad, because he was a psychopath that didn't have the skill sets required in order to run something that complex. And it eventually, when Barry Seal got popped, he was the guy that was flying it used to be, I'll drive a truck with a brick of cocaine across the border. And then Barry Seal was this military CIA pilot that said I'll just fill my whole fucking plane with cocaine and you get 1,000 runs in one. And he was just flying whole planes over to Mena, Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was the governor.
Yeah.
As well as a few other places.
That Tom Cruise movie where they get a call from the governor.
Bingo.
And they have to let Barry Seals out, which did happen.
Oh, yeah. And when Barry Seal finally got popped, all the rats started to run and try to look out for their own, and eventually that led to Oliver North taking the stand and totally bungling his fucking job on the stand. He was supposed to be like, bro, you're supposed to be the fall guy, and now we just have this huge fucking problem.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Wild. And
dude.
These are just one of thousands of stories like this.
Yep.
thousands and thousands
Very
of stories.
well documented that originally you're a fringe reporter, Gary Webb. You're making it all up. You're a disgrace. And Gary Webb's writing Dark Alliance. You can look up his Wikipedia page. And Gary Webb exposed how Freeway Ricky Ross was the outlet for all this cocaine. And holy shit, Freeway Ricky Ross is a crazy story. But then
I've
when
had
he
him
exposed,
on 3 times.
Yeah?
Yeah. I had
Dude,
him on
what
recently.
an interesting guy, right?
Yeah, he's selling weed in LA now,
Dude,
legally.
what a full circle. He goes from wanting to be a tennis pro to being
Yep.
the #1 kingpin of cocaine,
Well, not only
business
that,
mastermind.
Doesn't know how to read.
Yeah, illiterate the whole time.
Yeah, learned how to read in
Dude.
jail, became a lawyer in jail,
No
and
shit.
then realized that the 3 strikes law had been inaccurately applied to him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
they
crazy,
applied
dude.
it to one specific event. It's supposed to be you get arrested 3 different times for 3 felonies.
No, I think that they needed to cover it all
So he's
up
out of
because
jail.
shit was starting to come out.
Well,
Because Gary
yeah.
Webb was starting to
Yeah,
fucking.
yeah.
I mean, maybe
No
Gary
doubt.
Webb was after that, but then Gary Webb committed suicide by shooting himself in the head 2
Twice.
times.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
Crazy movie about that too.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
There's so many of these things. It's like the idea of a conspiracy theory being a ridiculous fringe thing doesn't hold water anymore.
It's like the Jimmy Dore skit. It's like reading. You mean reading? You should try it.
Jimmy's the best.
Yeah, I love Jimmy
He was just
much,
here.
dude. What a
He
legend.
just filmed his new special at
No
the
way.
Mothership. Yeah. Jimmy's the best. I love him to death. I've known him from comedy, from back in the day.
Yep.
And then when he was at Young Turks, when he was a leftist.
Yep.
And then, which he really still holds all those same values.
No, he holds it down.
Yeah,
like
he's
you and him
still
are the
for the
2 guys I
workers.
point to and him a little more than you now, of when I'm like, where's the sane left still at?
Right.
It's kind of like you guys, and like like Eric Weinstein is a good example. Eric and
Yes.
Brett Weinstein.
Yes.
There's a couple, but a lot of them have
there's
just
people
gone
that
insane.
didn't. Taibbi's another one.
Taibbi's great. I love Taibbi.
There's people who didn't cave.
Yep.
But did they get fucking attacked? Boy, they have a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah.
It's like it's so hard to know what's real in the world, and unless you have Schellenberger, unless you have Glenn Greenwald, unless you have those people out there
Yep.
that are risking their neck, they're sticking their neck out there to tell you exactly what's going on. This is what funded it. This is how it started.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let them say any differently. We made an agreement with Russia. We did this. NATO did that. This is what's going on. And
Can't be bought.
And there's it's so important, and they rise now. There's so many of them now, and they're coming. It's becoming much more mainstream. And if you look at some of their videos, it's millions of views, and then you find that MSNBC is getting a fraction of that. Yeah. And they're corporate funded, enormous, huge organizations with staff, and now they're hemorrhaging people.
It's wild to watch the mainstream journalists, like the MSNBC folk, have to leave. Like Joy Reid just left, for example, and when Don Lemon left,
they got fired.
Exactly.
You can't say left
they're
because they didn't
fired.
want to leave.
Yep.
They got kicked out.
But they try to make it in the new media world, and they're just like, you have no value here because you were never good at this job. You were just good at reading propaganda to us.
You look good, and you got put on camera.
Whereas Tucker Carlson get kicked out, and he fucking slays it, and he just grows bigger and bigger and bigger because he's not bought and he's not scared, and he actually is good at communicating and interviewing and getting to the truth. And it's so cool to watch this seismic shifting in the industry.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's a fascinating time. And I think it's good for humans.
Oh, yeah.
It's good for the human race. It's good and there's going to be a lot of bullshit out there. There's a lot of stuff that's not true, but that's okay too. Yep. You'll figure it out.
Yep.
Well, the truth will rise. There's too many people that are telling the truth, and there's too much that's undeniable that once you start reading, you start questioning virtually everything.
Fun tie for 2 things you guys were just talking
about. Oh,
yeah.
Southern Air Transport. This is the airline, right?
So this was the airline used. Came out the same day that they filed for bankruptcy after being in Columbus, Ohio, being used by Leslie Wexner's limited
Leslie
company.
Wexner is deeply tied into those CIA
A lot
lines.
of roads lead back to Columbus, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, and it's all because of Leslie Wexner.
Talk about that a little more. I got
All
some things to share with our friend.
Jamie's got his own conspiracy.
Got some files.
Heard that. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Why? It's wild how many of these things. And again, before the internet, this is how they did business. This is why it's so sloppy. It's because before the internet, you didn't have to cover your tracks. You could get away with this stuff.
And the thing about the internet that I love that gets me called a controlled opposition all the time is that I love that all of their tactics work backwards too. I can use those tactics too. I can make propaganda, because what propaganda is just convincing messaging.
Right.
And if you have convincing messaging in the hands of an evil fucking megalomaniacal dictator, government, CIA, whatever it is, that's really bad. But if you have propaganda tools in the hands of regular citizens that have morals and values that want the best for the world, correctly applied, you can fight back against them.
Right.
And so there's this element where I'm looking at how do you open people's minds? Like, how do you strategize to like get your, and it's a balance, right? Because when I'm reporting on something, it's important to tell the truth. It's important to be accurate. And accuracy, if you really dig enough and get enough accuracy, that reduces entertainment value. But if you find the way to balance entertainment value with accuracy the right way, which is always a moving target, you can change the world. Like, I'm a regular dude 2 years ago. I was an Uber Eats driver, an ultra marathon running guide. I was like a no one in the middle of nowhere. And then I'm like, all right, I'll just contribute and I'll start trying to tell these stories, trying to learn and communicate what's going on.
Well, you have to have a particular knack for it.
You do,
and you
yeah.
have to be really interested in these things.
Interest is the most important part.
Very, actually, totally, completely interested in it.
I think that a lot of people try to get into like podcasting and like this internet field these days because it's like what you're supposed to do.
It's a business.
But they don't realize that that's going to be your job every day for the rest of your life. You better fucking love it. Right?
Yeah. Well, you're seeing that with a lot of podcasters where they just they start off and then they fall off because they can't do it because they're not interested.
Yep. And it's a lot of work and a lot of hassle, and there's no guarantee of success. It's like a very saturated industry.
And you have to actually be locked in with what you're talking about, because if you're not, there's too much competition. There's too many people that are locked in.
Yep.
Okay, what do you think is going on with the whole UAP thing?
Dude, I love this fucking conversation.
I love this fucking conversation.
It's the most interesting.
I never get tired of it.
Do you want to go the angle of like, what are the crafts, or do you want to go the bigger angle of like, what is the phenomenon?
Okay, let's start with what is the phenomenon.
I think that right now, science and religion and UAP exposure are all converging on similar truths. And what I mean by that is that science, so you know the science of consciousness, how we don't really know where the fuck consciousness comes from?
Right.
But there's a lot of people that start to suggest that it sounds like we're antenna that are receiving consciousness from some sort of consciousness field or some sort of other, like...
Have you read any Thomas Campbell?
No, I don't think
you
so.
You should read the Big Toe, Theory of Everything. It's very bizarre stuff. Very hard to swallow. You got to go back and listen to it multiple times.
I like
read
that
it
kind of shit.
times. I had him on the podcast, and at the end of it, I was like, we got to stop here. And I have to think about everything you said, and then we'll bring you back, and we'll go deeper, because he wanted to keep going and go deeper and deeper. Like, he's been living in these realms.
It goes and goes, dude. Because you're talking metaphysics, you're talking physics, you're talking
multiverse,
like, history and like disclosure about history and dimension. And like, I suspect that whatever consciousness is coming from is this multiverse, this consciousness field, this ether, this multidimensional thing, whatever. I suspect that's very similar to what UAPs are traversing in and out of and through. And I suspect that's very similar to what we identify as either the gods plural, the aliens plural that have these abilities we don't have,
angels,
as
and
well as
demons.
God singular, which is probably the highest up above all of those things. I suspect there's a version of all these things that are starting to converge on one truth. Because when you learn about remote viewing, that's what really cracked it for me, was learning how much money the CIA has invested in remote viewing over the years. The CIA is not spending millions and millions of dollars on some crackpot bullshit that's not going to work. They would for a little while, but they've been doing it and doing it and doing it. And now we've got disclosure from people that are coming out whistleblowing that they are doing it today. And I'm in the program, and this is how we did it.
Have you listened to the telepathy tapes?
I've listened to a little bit of them. I've not listened all the way through.
I had Kai Dickens on the podcast the other day, and she explained the whole thing. Like, provable. Hours and hours and hours of nonverbal autistic kids who have telepathy. Provable telepathy. Undeniable.
It's crazy,
100%
dude.
Accuracy. Wild.
Yeah. And
Wild
I suspect
stuff.
that all of that is, and there's a weaponization of it. There's I mean, it's not just public study of it. There's definitely been private study of it by the intelligence agencies and probably the weapons developers for a long time. I mean, I was very surprised to hear Elon's answer to your alien question the other day, which I understand that he probably couldn't talk about it anyway.
That's how I take all of his answers about aliens.
Yeah. It's like,
okay.
Nice try. I had to try.
All right.
But like,
and
there's
look,
no way.
I don't ask him about it off air either.
Yeah.
I don't.
I mean,
you
got to respect a man's like private. Like, he's got NDAs up the wazoo for that kind of shit.
Also, he has top secret military clearance and he runs SpaceX.
Bingo.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Bingo.
I wouldn't say jack shit.
And that's where flat Earth
they're
comes
all
in.
real. They're very subtle. That's what I would say too.
Exactly. And I think that flat Earth, a lot of the evidence that gets cited as flat Earth, like, for example, NASA fakes footage. And if you look into it, it's fucking obvious that NASA is putting out fake footage. They're clearly on wires in some of that footage. Clearly some of that footage is underwater and there's bubbles fucking floating up and shit. But
which footage?
Just like NASA publishes all kinds of footage, from like the ISS to they have live streams to they do like videos, and no one ever watches it because like whoever watches random.
So you
NASA
think some
footage,
of the ISS footage is fake?
There's a lot of footage you can find online that is coming from NASA where there's like little slips or like a guy is like they're doing their floating shit and then the buddy reaches out and grabs where a wire is to help his buddy get back into frame, like little slips of the where they're like just trying to orchestrate. Yeah, and
I've never seen any of that.
And who knows
I've
if
seen
it's
the moon
who knows if
landing
it's
footage
real
that
or
looks
not.
hokey.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is that gets cited by flat earthers as like NASA's covering up flat Earth.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is that there's a lot of reasons why NASA would cover up and produce fake footage from something like the ISS, and every single one of them rhymes with aliens. Because if there's any type of aliens going on up here, it's very possible that they are up there in that fucking space station, or they're or like they could be, like I don't know. And I'm not saying I think they are for sure. I'm just saying that people tend to look at a piece of evidence and jump too quickly on the one explanation that they're sure is right. And sometimes there's other explanations. And aliens apply to so many parts of our world, like demons. Sound very much like the UAP phenomenon to me, right? A lot of these religious beliefs sound very much like explainable just with different wording by UAP phenomenon. As in, some of these aliens, we seem to be being told that they communicate telepathically. They have energetic ability, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point where I'm suspecting that we're gonna be finding out that religion is like humans trying to interpret these phenomenon over millennia in all the human ways we would, and telling stories about them. And I'm not saying that God's not real. I'm saying God is real, and that does not diminish God at all. I almost think it makes God more important and more powerful to understand, because from my understanding, correct me if you have a different one, it sounds like we're getting a lot of reports that are cross-corroborating that there's more than one thing going on here. It's not all aliens are the same, and it's not some of them might be us from the future, some of them might be us from under the water, some of them might be other species. It's really hard to pin down like what all these phenomenon are, but they're definitely not just made up.
And I think some of them are ours.
I agree.
I think I think the cover up is the weird part though. It's like if you go back to Operation Blue Book, when they started doing that, the sole purpose of Operation Blue Book is to take any credible story and make it look ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they talked about that openly. And then Hynek, when he left Operation Blue Book, became a believer.
Yeah.
And started talking about UFOs being real. That's that's a big old red flag right there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the UFO community is filled with people like that are, and it's really hard to know who's who. It's super hard to know who's who. And did you notice how recently, like a month ago sort of, there was this breaking story that set the whole UAP community on fire about this disclosure that I think Jeremy Corbell was coming out and whistleblowing on, if I remember correctly, that they were saying that they're gonna they're gonna trick us by saying that there's a mothership arriving in 3 years. Right?
Yeah, I did hear that.
And it becomes this thing where it's like, how do you know he's saying that he's exposing it, but how do you know if he's exposed? It's just like, it's the ultimate test of, are you skeptical enough and also open-minded enough and thoughtful enough?
Also, if there's a believer, get them some bullshit. Feed the believer some bullshit.
Exactly. They don't even have to know that they're in on it, right?
They don't have to know. And it could be like kind of plausible bullshit, and then it could be corroborated with some other bullshit that you have.
I think that's what most bullshit artists are in most fields. I think it's usually useful idiots, like people like myself, genuinely. Like I am in some ways one of those people in the sense that if I get fooled by something, I become that. Which is why it's so important to think really carefully and to be okay with being wrong, because you never know what your sources are.
Yeah.
And that's also why I'm really careful not to do very many like leaks or whistleblows or like, because how do I know who the fuck you are? I don't want to spend all the time to try to vet you and find out where you came from and your story came from. I'd way rather just learn. There's so much to learn.
One of the weirdest things about Jacques Vallée's work is that Jacques Vallée has been documenting this stuff, again, it's like since I think the 50s or the 60s is when he started, but he's also documented historical stories. And the historical stories
You mean like from before modern times?
Like 1700s, 1800s, and these stories are the same story. They're the same story when people never heard of them. Not only that, in the 70s, he's documenting this woman that in California found an egg-shaped craft in her yard. Like she tells this story about confronting this being. There's an egg-shaped craft. These fucking egg-shaped crafts all described by people who don't know that someone else has described this story.
And no one would ever choose an egg shape when they're describing an aircraft.
Right,
ever.
right.
Especially back then.
And
right?
it's also all telepathic communication. It's all like weird moments.
Same stories.
Lapse of time, memories confused. You feel like your brain's been erased, don't know what's going on. You find yourself in a field. How did I get here? There's a lot of weird shit that's like the same story over and over and over again. Too much so that you get, first of all, clearly, when you're dealing with things in the 17 and 1800s, it's not modern propaganda. It's not the government. They're not covering up drones in the 1700s. Yeah. So why are these people selling? Why are these stories in the fucking Bhagavad Gita?
I mean, you could make the argument, not the Bhagavad Gita, but you could make the argument that back then people were writing fiction or wanted attention. Like those could apply, but I'm skeptical. But yeah, I get down with the ancient ones, like with the Graham Hancocks of this world. I love that. Was my first conspiracy theory stuff back when I was a leftist. Is I was just like ancient conspiracy theories. Let's go, and it's so compelling. The Great Flood, the Randall Carlsons of this world, and the way that they kind of talk about. And it's so obvious more and more and more that there is a cover up. And Jimmy Corsetti has been really going hard at mainstream archaeology lately.
He's fantastic.
Right? To not just look at the evidence of the old school, like the ancient conspiracy theories, but actually to just go at the cover up today. Because that sometimes is the most effective thing, is to just target the cover up. Because that is clear evidence that we're onto something.
Yeah,
and who knows what it is.
Because of Jimmy Corsetti and his exposure of them planting those trees in Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
He was one of the first people to say, they're changing it. They're pulling those trees out. Because he was one of the first people to say, hey, those roots are going to damage these ruins. And they're like, no, it's fine, it's safe. And then they're like, actually, the roots are damaging the ruins.
But then you do get people that like go all the way to the guy that thinks Nibiru is the 12th planet or whatever.
Zachariah Sitchin.
And like, there's people that go so far down these ancient conspiracy theory rabbit holes that I feel like we're getting way off track here, guys. Like we're starting to cite sources that are not credible, and we're taking it to places where like, maybe the Anunnaki were here to mine gold, and maybe very plausible that we're all genetically engineered, I think. But there's like a fine line between maybe that could be true, and
those stories are the best, though. They are most fun.
I'm planning to write a book that is sort of like a series of books, really, in my across my later life, that is basically, imagine writing a book that is like set in the you could write ancient books about the old school, where if that book was real, you could still wind up in today's world with all the same evidence we have, and it could be real. Even if back then it's crazy magic and there's like all this crazy shit going on, it could still end up with, the pyramids are left over from that, and the ruins are here after that Great Flood thing happened.
Right.
And then you could like write all kinds of crazy conspiracy theory stories into today that like, how could you prove that this is not real?
Right.
I just think that's the most fun aspect, is how much we don't know.
Well, the evidence of ancient technology is one of the more fascinating aspects of trying to piece together our past, because whatever explanation you try to use to make the pyramids, none of them work.
Nope, not even close.
None of them work.
And even their purpose doesn't make any fucking sense.
No.
Clearly, they were not tombs.
No.
I mean, pretty clearly they were some sort of power generation or something like that.
Well,
energy.
Have you seen Christopher?
I've been seeing Timothy, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar guy that's going around on podcasts these days. Timothy someone. Yeah, dude, it's crazy.
Chris Dowd, right? Yeah. Christopher Dowd. So
I've heard
Christopher Dowd is Dunn. Christopher Dunn. Sorry, Chris. Christopher Dowd
is a different guy's last name.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm thinking of Mike Dowd from the 7-2, the documentary on the corrupt police department.
So what's Dunn
Christopher
saying?
Dunn is all about, he's an engineer, and his theory was that it was a giant power plant.
Yep.
And he has a very sophisticated Giza, the power plant. Is
he talking about the aquifers underneath them and the two types of stone sort of a thing?
He's talking about the physical structure of the way the pyramid was made, and that there was, excuse me, the subterranean chamber that they used to generate a pounding of vibration that went through the entire structure of the pyramid. It generated this vibration, and they had chemicals that were coming in that were producing hydrogen.
Yep.
He had the king's chamber, the way it's lined up. This is exactly how you do it if you were trying to do this. It's like everything matches up mathematically. It's fascinating.
And they're built on aquifers from the Nile flooding every year. And every year when the Nile floods, water rushes underneath those pyramids through these like stony kind of like porous rocky structures under there. It's just, there's so many interesting versions of what it could be.
At the very least, it's a mystery. And it's
not
also a mystery that shows fantastic engineering and construction methods and the ability to move rocks and bring them from 500 miles away through the mountains that are 50 tons. Like, how?
I suspect telepathy of some form. I suspect like alien capability. Do you think it's technology, or do you think it's like...
Well, it's some kind of technology, right?
You don't think it could possibly be that aliens have the ability to literally move things with their minds?
I mean, look, if you're dealing with something that can come here from another planet, communicates telepathically, who knows? Who fucking knows?
Nope.
But even if it's human beings, let's say it's super sophisticated human beings that lived at the very least 4,500 years ago, because that's the conventional dating of the construction.
Yeah.
Even that, you're like, how?
Yep, we can't do it today.
How? And
Yeah.
people that say we can't, sure, we could. It would take hundreds of years.
Jimmy Corsetti's done some great videos where he compiles real videos of us moving large objects today,
Yeah.
and like the trucks breaking and the cranes falling off of cliffs and all this shit of like, look at how hard it is to move these kinds of rocks.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
dude.
And the idea that they were completed in 20 years, which is the
total
reign
garbage.
of Khufu.
Yeah,
It's
total
nonsense.
garbage.
And it's also like these archaeologists they're clinging to this narrative because this is what they taught in school, this is what they wrote
Clearly.
books about.
And then when you look at the cover-up, there's no reason for that level of cover-up if it's just a building technology. That's where I start to go, clearly that is connected to these UAP technologies, to these free energy technologies, whatever it is. There has to be some sort of reason why covering up how these ancient structures and ancient cultures were built and worked has to relate somehow to something very important and valuable today.
I think they also have to somehow or another explain it, because to say that it's impossible opens up too many doors, and it removes the expert. Because you're not an expert anymore, because you're one of us now.
Yeah, it
you
does do
might
that.
know more about that site than I do, but you still don't know what the fuck happened.
Yeah.
So you have to claim, or at least push it out there. That you're the voice of reason. You're the voice of this is the actual historians. We're the real archaeologists. Don't worry, we've got it covered.
I saw a really funny meme the other day that was, it was like 4 pictures, and it was humanity gets really intelligent, invents AI. AI builds all these crazy technologies and pyramids. Sunflare wipes out AI. Humanity restarts. It's
it could be.
That's a fair. I mean, how would we know?
Or
right?
it could be the asteroids that hit, or the comets
I
that
think
hit at the
that's-
Younger Dryas impact.
It is an
theory.
interesting split in the conversation, right, between the solar flare conversation and the comet impact conversation.
Right.
And there's like evidence for both.
Right.
It could have been both.
Could have
at
been
once,
both,
or
and
across the period of
multiple
1,000 years or
versions of it.
something.
Well, that's the Younger Dryas impact theory. They think there was more than one event.
Uh-huh.
They think there was an event around 11,800 years ago, and then again around 10,000 plus years ago.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this makes sense why civilization sort of emerges 6,000 years
Bingo.
ago. Because it's like we were probably fucking savages for thousands of years. We're probably monsters.
I mean,
the
I'd
people
imagine
that lived,
that we only lived inside of sorts of like Ellora caves type places for a while, right?
right?
'Cause
Which
you get
is
a
they
nuclear
found
winter.
evidence of these massive
They are
underground structures
crazy.
that they can't explain. Why would someone use their resources in a time of hunters and gatherers to
Yeah.
build these underground structures that are fucking insane? Like
Yeah.
multiple football fields underground.
Entire cities that can house thousands
Yes,
and thousands of people. And a couple of smart researchers point out really astutely that if you were doing that to hide from other humans, to like protect yourself from other humans, you would never dig into a cave system that you could just get drowned in.
Right.
You would never dig into a cave system that has no way out so that you can just get sealed in.
Right.
That's clearly not, it wasn't
Also,
to escape humans.
You'd have to leave to get food.
Bingo.
You'd be trapped. Like the Mongols used to like famously sit outside cities for weeks,
Yep.
just waiting for people to starve. We'll just wait. We have plenty of food out here.
And that's another example of this exact same phenomenon we're talking about, of these old control systems that worked perfectly well in the old era. And now that we have these communication technologies and everyone's getting linked together, it's just the free flow of ideas that just, it's like this natural evolution of consciousness and humanity that we just naturally start to break through those I'm of the mindset that, yeah, we can all change the world, and yeah, our choices do matter a lot, but also in some ways we're all just part of this cosmic system of like the evolution, like we're all just part of this giant humanity system,
right?
Where we all collectively, on balance, with all the weird probabilities of all these people, we're gonna evolve technology. We were gonna industrial revolutionize. We were gonna find oil. We were gonna discover electronics. We were gonna invent AI. It was always gonna happen,
right?
And this is an era that is always was gonna happen, and it will happen one way or the other. Like, we affect how it happens. We could go the Whitney Webb dystopian, like they rule us with surveillance everywhere, or we could go to this great utopia of like everyone has enough and we're all using technology for the better.
Well, I think she's right that that's a possibility.
It's a super
it's on the
important one
menu.
to talk about too.
Well, Elon talks about like there's an 80% chance that AI will save us, 20% chance that it will rule us.
I do respect how he openly will say that like yeah, the things I'm inventing could be used for evil. Like the things I'm inventing are dangerous.
Yeah.
And we need to be careful and regulate them properly and create them with intention and careful care. I don't know as he's necessarily doing as much as I would hope he's doing to take care with that, but I'm sure glad it's him and not Jeffrey Epstein, who was deeply interested in all these same technologies. This is a whole other side of him that no one talks about, is his interest in technologists and geneticists and all those things, right?
Yeah, well, he had a lot of influence over scientists. That's a creepy move to like take scientists and
throw
bring
parties for them, throw conventions for them. And a couple of them, a couple of them had some serious accusations, like Marvin Minsky, for example. But I bet a lot of them were not compromised. Like Stephen Hawking, everyone freaked out when Stephen Hawking was on the list. But it makes perfect sense as you realize that he was throwing conventions on that island for scientists specifically to bring them all together, because that way you get connections, you can get favors, even if you're not blackmailing them. Then they just want to be on your good side because you have all these connections and you can fund all their projects, and you become this integral part of this technological sort of space. That's
Blackmail's
so
not the only tool. That's a blunt instrument. There's a lot of just connections.
He also just hooked people up with wives. Like, do you know that he claimed that he introduced Melania to Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. I suspect, Melania conspiracy time, I suspect that Melania has been whispering in Trump's ear. I think she was trafficked before, either bad trafficked or good, or just like knew Epstein and like knew that world a little bit. But I suspect that she's been whispering in his ear about what that really is and does and all that things, because she's been kind of like acting from the back a lot. But when you really dig into what Melania's been doing, she's very, very active in anti-trafficking and in protecting trafficked victims and girls and stuff. And as Trump, when he married her, and then they have Barron, and he's watching his son grow up. So you have this young child, and you have this wife telling you about her previous life, probably, and just whispering in your ear that like, this could be your legacy. This could be your legacy. This could be your legacy, right? Because he used to be friends with those people, even though I don't think he was blackmailed, because I think that would have come out when the Democrats were going for him.
Right.
And maybe he was involved in the trafficking a little bit because of the things that he bought and the people that he knew and like Roy Cohn connections. But I don't even know about that. But regardless, he knows the game. And then he marries Melania. And then more and more, like, he was in charge when Epstein went down. He was the only one that when Epstein got arrested and they were going around asking for dirt, he was like, I'll fully fucking cooperate. Fuck that guy. I'll tell you everything that I know. And so I suspect that Melania has been instrumental in his sort of shift to being the only guy willing to go after those traffickers.
Out of all the information that's getting disclosed, supposedly this administration, what do you have the least faith that we're going to come to
Epstein,
a conclusion?
for sure.
Epstein.
And I think it's because of Israel. I think that because when you really dig into Epstein, his entire network was Israel. It was clearly. Like Ehud Barak was the ex-prime minister and the ex-head of Israeli intelligence. Leslie Wexner was one of the most powerful pro-Israeli philanthropists. The whole organization was Israel. So I'm not saying it was all of Israel.
It was all an intelligence gathering and
it was targeting Americans. It was targeting American officials and the American president.
Right.
And the CIA does have interest in those targets too. Elements in the CIA does. Certainly they had help from the CIA, and certainly they had help from these other organized crime and intelligence operations. But you don't, like, so for example, Dan Bongino, the new, deputy director of the FBI, he recently had this clip that went all around where he said on camera that he had a source that he trusted deeply. And he's an informed guy. He was at a Fox News interview, and the source told him that Epstein was working for an intelligence agency in the Middle East. And I don't know which one, but someone in the Middle East. And to be fair, we all already knew this. We already know who he worked for. At least I think so. But I'm looking at, okay, Dan, so if this giant group of Jewish billionaires is running a sex trafficking operation targeting American politicians and business people and stuff, you think they're working with an Arab or Muslim nation in the Middle East? Like, you think that Leslie Wexner is devoting his entire life to philanthropies on behalf of Israel, but then he's going to work for Saudi Arabia when he's doing this trafficking ring?
Right. But if someone says to him that they're all working for a country in the Middle East, knowing he knows what that means, but not specifying, doesn't he kind of have to repeat it that same way?
Well, he also has to repeat it the same way because he won't get the job if he says Israel.
Exactly.
Because Israel has so much control over our government right now. And I'm not saying that all Jews are in on something. Clearly, internet. Thank you.
Internet.
And Joe is definitely not saying that.
Definitely not.
But the Israel's government is every bit as as vulnerable to the deep state effect as the American government. But I would argue that Israel's government is way more vulnerable to it because of the people that founded Israel and the way it was founded. It was founded in a modern time, much more recently, by it was a revolutionary founding. And I can totally sympathize with the Jewish desire to have that state. I get it. But because of the way that happened, the people that founded Israel were a bunch of organized crime figures in America, the Jewish mob, that were helping with money and with arms trafficking to get the guns there because they had to have guns. And it was the Rothschild banking family sending a whole bunch of money and getting the declaration in the first place. And then the people that were there, the three different organizations, the Irgun, the Lehi group, and the Haganah, those were the three paramilitary groups that fought to found Israel, and they're the heroes of Israel, which I understand the narrative that they're heroes, but when Israel was officially founded, they officially designated Irgun and Lehi as terrorist organizations because they had been bombing civilians. They'd been bombing British civilians. The first official act of terror before they changed the definition was the bombing of the King David Hotel, where these terrorists, these Lehi and Irgun terrorists, a bunch of different groups, the guy who planned that bombing later became the prime minister of Israel. They were bombing civilians. So when those are the groups that are fighting to found that nation, even if all the Jews there are wonderful people, the leadership is inherently composed of these people that have been deeply corrupt for all time. And so you get this fertile ground for this kind of deep state effect to take power. And when you start to research the heads of state of Israel over history, you realize that a bunch of them were in those groups doing those terrorist acts and have done a bunch of dark stuff because those were the people that were at the top of that military organization. Those terrorist organizations reformed to form the IDF.
And what's interesting is
party.
You can talk about this now,
Exactly.
post-October 7th.
It opened wide open.
Post-Gaza.
You want to know a funny story, actually? I didn't know shit about it. And I started doing 9/11 stuff. And I was doing a 9/11 video on my YouTube. And I knew about the Dancing Israelis conspiracy theory that is very much a real set of documents. And I knew that I'm not allowed to talk about Israel for some reason. And I didn't really know why. And I realized I better fucking understand this thing before I crater my new channel and career on this topic I don't understand. If I'm going to take a stance against Israel at all, I should understand why and how. And so I started doing research, and I shelved that research, and I switched to researching Israel and Palestine and the history there and what's going on. And I finished the video, and it was October 6th. And I was I was very worried because it's you weren't allowed to talk about it. And I had just made this whole documentary about the history of Israel, Palestine, and the propaganda and what it all was. And I published it on October 6th on my Locals channel. And I kind of had this lean back and if that's the end of the ride and I get canceled for this shit, so be it. And then literally the next day, and I'm not saying that October 7th was a good thing, but I'm saying that literally the next day, the entire internet was ablaze about Israel and Palestine, and everyone was talking about it. Wow. And it was the weirdest fucking coincidence. And suddenly it was oh, all right, let's fucking dig this thing open. Because unfortunately, I think that the state of the Israeli influence that sustained them for so long, that was essential to them surviving this long, I think that it has grown cancerous to the Jewish faith in general. Because Jeffrey Epstein is the perfect example of this. Jeffrey Epstein was the world's most prolific and evil sex trafficker that we know of so far, ever. And he very clearly was a Jewish organization of Jewish people working on behalf of Israel and other groups. And so that's a dark stain on Israel and on the Jewish people if you own it. If you try to defend that, that's not good. You don't want to have to defend that.
Right.
You want to be free of that kind of shit because the Jewish people don't believe in that. That's not what Jews are. Jews are regular people, just
it's the deep state
else.
of the intelligence agencies in Israel.
And the thing about Israel is that Jewish people have every incentive to need to defend Israel, right?
Right.
Because if I'm a Jew, it's of course you have to defend Israel. That's very understandable. It's your people, and you don't want another Holocaust. You don't want another Jews have been in conflict with other people for ages because they are outsiders and because they are so different and because they group up and lots of reasons. But you don't as a Jewish person, you're now faced with this choice. Do I stand by Israel always, forever, for everything and defend everything they do? Or do I get labeled as a self-hating Jew like Dave Smith gets labeled, like Glenn Greenwald gets labeled?
Right.
Do I stand against all of my culture? And do I get ostracized by my family and by my community? But the problem is that if you have to defend everything that Israel does, you're forced to defend this fucking deep state that is in bed with these organized crime figures.
Right.
And I would argue that that Israeli deep state is just as much in bed with all the other organized crime as our deep state is, as the Saudi deep state is.
Right.
Like, there's evil people at the top of all these governments.
Well, the thing is, Israel is connected to one race of people.
Yeah.
It's correct. Whereas the United States, which also is involved in a lot of really fucked up things all over the world, when people think about the United States, they don't think about it as one.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it just puts us all in this impossible situation, and it's this.
Right.
It's an impossible conversation that we all, and I'm glad for it because it's a maturing process, and I think we need to do it very delicately and very carefully and thoughtfully, because Jewish people are people, and they're not evil. Like.
Right.
But there are evil Jewish people, and there are evil American people, and there are evil
Absolutely.
Saudi people, and it's just that's the way it is.
Well said.
Right? And,
well said.
And so I welcome the conversation, but unfortunately, the thing for me, fortunately, is when I first researched it, I came across this documentary on Rumble called The Occupation of the American Mind, which is a very well put together documentary that is mostly Jewish people speaking about the history of Israel and about how they realized in the 80s when there was this specific operation where they wound up bombing this refugee camp called Sabra and Shatila. Or a refugee camp in a place called Sabra and Shatila. And there was other bombing, like atrocity. It was like, I guess it was a massacre, it wasn't a bombing. And it was the first time where Western journalists had taken video cameras over there, and video feed were coming back of the conflict of what was happening. And American sentiment turned really harshly against Israel in the 80s there. And they realized we don't need to win just the kinetic war. We need to win the ideological war on the global scale. Because if we don't win that ideological war, the whole world will turn against us and call us a colonial project, which I would argue they kind of are, but that's not the point here. And I don't mean to say I'm necessarily right about my perspective on that. But that's when they switched to a propaganda war, and they started targeting the United States with propaganda. And they hired the world's top propagandists to teach Israelis and Israeli military officials and government officials how to communicate with the West and how to propagandize the West so that we would remain in the dark a little bit. That's why we have this veil and this anti-Semitism thing and this like all that. It's why you're not allowed to talk about it, because it evolved over time. And they eventually hired this guy that I think is called Howard Luntz. And Luntz worked with the Israel Project. There's a report online that came out in 2009, I think, called the Israel Language Dictionary, the Israel American Language Dictionary. And it's basically a word for word. This is how you discuss the rockets raining down. This is how you discuss the settlements. This is how you discuss the occupation and the palace and all these things. And they use examples of words that work and words that don't work. And when you read it, you realize like, holy shit, that's exactly what politicians have been saying on TV my entire life. And they use Obama as one example of really good words that work. You should talk like Obama because he's good at sort of empathizing with the other side and making us understand that like we're here for peace and they're the terrorists. And I say that to mean that we live inside this propagandized space because it's been essential to them for so long to protect that image in order to continue the deep state element of what they're doing. When I would argue that we would all be much better off if Bibi was fucking not there. And we had a more sane person in charge of Israel that was actually there for peace and not there for whatever the fuck Bibi is doing.
Well,
and we could start to heal this thing and talk about it. And
most people in the general public aren't even aware that the Israeli people were protesting against Netanyahu before October 6th.
Yeah, he's about to get kicked out.
Hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and that it had been going on for a long time.
100%.
Yeah.
I suspect, I'm hoping I'm not blowing the lid on Trump's idea here. I kind of suspect that Trump is kind of in on a coup against Netanyahu right now. This is just my theory based upon the way he talked about like occupying Gaza and the way he's friends with Jared Kushner and the way he's friends with the Adelsons. I suspect that these powerful Jews, like the Adelson type people, are starting to realize that Netanyahu is kind of sinking this ship and he's kind of fucked it all up, and it's not going well for Israel in the public conversation. Like I can ratio just about anyone I want on Twitter over the Israel thing because the public sentiment is just shifting. And it's not healthy for anyone, for Jewish people or anyone else. And I'd suspect that the powerful Jewish people are starting to see that and are starting to scheme on how do we fucking get Netanyahu out of there and put someone in that can actually move us towards some sort of peace. Because without a genuine desire for, like, Netanyahu is on fucking camera saying that they have propped up Hamas in the Gaza Strip because they don't want a real government in the Gaza Strip, because it's far better for them to run this occupation and to eventually take the land if Hamas is, that's not an exact quote. Everyone should look that up for themselves.
But not just propped up, but funded.
Exactly, yeah. And intentionally kept there.
Just when you hear that, you're like, well, what's the logic for funding Hamas? What logic?
Well, it's the exact same logic as us funding the Taliban.
Yeah.
It's the exact same logic.
Did you see
the exact
that?
same strategies.
Did you see that? Oh, God, I wish I would remember where it was happening, where someone had to say, are we really sending the Taliban $40 million a week?
Yeah.
And we were.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it happens over and over and over again as we just are, like, we're just sending money willy-nilly to all these, like, Ukraine, Israel, Taliban, you name it. Like, and those are just a small spattering. We've done it across the whole world, Indonesia, Central and South America.
And we've been doing it that way forever.
And it's this playbook of the deep state is a funny term. I think it's kind of time to retire it, because it's not the deep state. It's like this corporate, like, transnational corporate criminal organization space where transnational corporations like the banks, like JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, they were banking Jeffrey Epstein. They don't answer to us. They're not American. They don't give a shit about America. Like, they give a shit about money and power. And they're legally required to, because they're a public corporation. That's a whole BlackRock.
Yeah.
We could go down. It's crazy. And so, like, when you look at it as people who have this globalist, and actually that's why people shit on Alex Jones for saying globalists. You know, like all the fucking anti-Jew people are like, just say the Jews. And it's like, no, dude, like, there's way more going on here. And the tie that binds all of them together, the Klaus Schwabs of this world, the Jeff Bezoses, and I don't know, maybe Jeff's a good guy, I don't know. But, like, the people that don't think in terms of, these are my people and I love them, but I'd rather, I'm like a piece of this global community of billionaires that, like, our job is just to make money and fucking control the world. Like, Bill Gates is a great example. They live outside of our world, and they do not give a shit if COVID kills 10,000 people or 100,000 people or if 10 million people, whatever. And I'm generalizing, because obviously they are individuals and they each have their own perspective on what's going on. But it feels to me from researching, there's enough of them that are evil that they're doing some horrible things. And the ones that are a little less evil, maybe they know what they're in on. Maybe they only know some of it, because you don't have to disclose everything. In these kinds of plans, like, for example, in a CIA plot to overthrow the government of Guatemala, you're not telling everyone the whole plan.
They didn't tell Smedley Butler.
No, they didn't tell him shit.
Right.
They told him that, like, this. They told him that they were going to overthrow a communist that was already taking over the, like. I think they probably told him that he was a Jewish communist, because they think they were riding on, like, FDR's second in command was Henry Morgenthau Jr. And he was deeply aligned with the Jewish, like, the rich Jewish kind of powers in the world at that day. And there was a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment back then. And so I suspect that they told Smedley Butler that, like, this guy's a fucking Jewish plant and he's part of the Rothschild thing, and, like, he's a communist, we need to overthrow him. And Smedley didn't buy it. Smedley collected fucking research on them, and he went to FDR and he exposed the whole plot. But the problem was that FDR couldn't do anything, because these people, titans of industry, like the Bushes of the world, the Fords, I don't even know all their names at this point. It's been a while since I did that dig. He couldn't do anything. And so nothing happened. He couldn't charge them, because they just said, you just got out of the Great Depression. We will fuck your economy up. Done.
Ian,
there's so much power.
Let's bring this to a fucking halt.
Yeah.
Enough. You freak me out. The rest
I
of my
already
day's
blew the
ruined.
whole thing up, dude. And let's real quickly though. Be clear.
Okay.
Joe does not agree with everything that I just said on this podcast.
I can't believe what you said.
Yeah, Joe doesn't know shit.
I am
okay.
so upset.
This
that
is
I even
Ian Carroll
platformed
speaking.
You.
And right,
You're
it's like
outrageous.
And also, like, I'm perfectly willing to have a conversation about this. Like, I don't know that I'm right about everything. I just know the sources I've read and where I've read them, and I try my best to figure out where they are.
Very, very reasonable.
Right?
Very reasonable in the
know?
way you do this, and I think it's a valuable service. So thank you very much. Thanks. It was
Dude,
a lot of
my
fun,
man,
too.
thank you.
It was very enjoyable. Tell everybody how they can find you.
Yeah, find me on X, Ian Carroll Show, and I have a new website that just launched, which is canceliancarroll.com. So cancel me, bitches.
Perfect.
Come at me.
Bye, everybody.